At the graduation, everyone mocked the elderly woman, but the principal did something no one expected. Faith Johnson held her diploma with trembling hands as laughter echoed through the auditorium of St. Benedict College in Riverside. At 72 years old, she had just earned her degree in education, a dream she had carried for over 5 decades. "Look, Grandma made it!" shouted Tyler Wilson, a 22-year-old who stood out among the graduates. "Wonder if she'll remember where she put the diploma tomorrow." The laughter spread like wildfire among the younger classmates. Some pointed at Faith, others made mocking gestures. The elderly woman felt her face burn with shame, but kept her head high, clutching the rolled-up diploma to her chest. Professor Amanda Thompson, 45, watched everything from the honor table with an unreadable expression. As the college's academic dean, she knew Faith's story well, but at that moment she simply observed the cruel spectacle unfolding before her eyes in silence. "Someone should tell her the graduation party isn't at the retirement home," Tyler continued, sparking more laughter. Faith swallowed the tears threatening to fall. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life, but never imagined it would be met with such scorn. The auditorium seemed to spin around her, and she leaned on her chair to steady herself. The ceremony continued as planned, but the atmosphere had shifted. Pitying glances mixed with mockery, and Faith felt like an animal on display. When it was finally time to leave, she walked slowly between the rows of chairs, hearing whispers and cruel remarks. "Imagine her teaching," a girl murmured. "The kids will have to yell for her to hear." "What if she forgets the lesson mid-explanation?" another added. Each word stabbed Faith's heart. She had returned to school after 50 years as a housekeeper, overcoming financial struggles and prejudice, but she never expected the worst would come on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Amanda Thompson remained seated, even as the auditorium emptied. She watched Faith leave slowly, alone, while the other graduates gathered in lively groups to celebrate. The dean felt a tightness in her chest, but wasn't sure what to do with the feeling. Outside the college, Faith searched for a bench to sit and catch her breath. The December sun beat down on her wrinkled face, but she barely felt the heat. Her hands still shook as she stared at the diploma, trying to find joy in the piece of paper that had cost her so much sacrifice. Tyler Wilson appeared at the college entrance, surrounded by a group of classmates, all still in their black gowns. Spotting Faith sitting alone on the bench, he couldn't resist another jab. "Hey guys, let's take a picture with our most experienced classmate," he said loudly enough for her to hear. "She can be our mascot." The group burst into laughter again. Some started moving toward Faith, who quickly stood and hurried toward the bus stop. Her steps were rushed, but her age kept her from moving swiftly. "Hey, Mrs. Johnson," Tyler called. "Aren't you coming to the graduation party? They'll be playing music from the 40s. The laughter followed Faith all the way to the bus stop, where she hid behind a pole, trying to disappear. The bus took 40 minutes to arrive, and the whole time she endured curious stares from passers-by and comments from graduates walking by. When she finally boarded, Faith chose a seat at the back of the bus and rested her forehead against the foggy window. The trip to her home in Meadowbrook Heights would be long, and she needed this time to process everything that had happened. The bus swayed through the streets of Riverside as Faith reminisced about the last 4 years of college. She had started the program at 68, after saving money for decades while working as a housekeeper. Her employers mocked her plans, saying it was too late to study, but she persisted. The first weeks at college were a shock. Faith barely knew how to use a computer, struggled to keep up with classes, and often felt completely lost. But she studied late into the night every evening, sitting at the kitchen table in her modest home, determined to prove she was capable. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Amanda Thompson arrived home that night, with the graduation scene still vivid in her memory. Her house in Brentwood was spacious and well decorated, a reflection of an academically successful life, but she felt empty. She took off her gown and hung it in the closet, but kept thinking about the pain in Faith's eyes. The principal went to the kitchen and made chamomile tea, trying to relax. She had learned about Faith's story through the professors, who often spoke about the unusual dedication of the oldest student. The elderly woman never missed class, always turned in assignments on time, and actively participated in discussions even when her classmates ignored her. Amanda remembered a conversation she'd had with Faith during the second year of the program. The older woman had come to her office nervous to ask if it was still possible to drop out. "Professor Amanda," Faith had said that afternoon, her eyes brimming with tears, "maybe I'm being foolish. The other students are right when they say I'm too old for this." "Faith," Amanda had replied firmly, "age has never been a barrier to learning. You have life experience your classmates can't even imagine." But now, reflecting on that conversation, Amanda wondered if she'd done the right thing by encouraging Faith to continue. Maybe it really was madness for a 70-year-old woman to try to graduate from a college full of young people. In Faith's modest apartment, the night was long and difficult. She placed her diploma on the dresser in her bedroom and stared at it for hours. All the effort, all the sleepless nights studying, all the financial sacrifices seemed to have been in vain. Faith remembered meeting Clarence, her 78-year-old neighbor, on the very first day of class. He had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years before retiring, and when he heard about Faith's plans, he offered to help with her studies. "Faith," Clarence had said that March afternoon 4 years ago, "studying at your age is an act of courage. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Clarence became her biggest supporter. Every afternoon after class, Faith would go to his house for help with the more difficult subjects. The old teacher had endless patience and explained concepts in education in a way she could understand. "Learning has no age limit," he often said. "Wisdom comes with years, and you have more than enough wisdom to teach." But now, alone in her room, Faith doubted everything. Maybe Clarence was just being kind. Maybe she really was too old for this. Maybe the young students at college were right. The next morning, Faith woke with swollen eyes from crying so much. She had slept little and felt exhausted. The diploma was still on the dresser, but now it seemed to mock her shattered dreams. The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock. Faith opened the door and found Clarence standing in the hallway, holding a simple bouquet of flowers and a proud smile on his face. "Good morning, Dr. Faith," he said, using the title that always made her smile. "I came to congratulate our newest educator." "Oh, Clarence," Faith sighed, forcing a smile. "Please, come in." Clarence immediately noticed something was wrong. Faith's eyes were red, and she showed no joy. He placed the flowers in a vase and sat in the simple living room, waiting for her to feel comfortable enough to talk. "Was the graduation not what you expected?" he asked gently. Faith told him everything that had happened the day before. The laughter, the cruel remarks, the public humiliation. Clarence listened in silence, feeling anger rise in his chest. As a retired educator, he knew well the destructive power of bullying, even when practiced by young adults. "Faith," he said when she finished speaking, "those young people don't know what they're missing. You have more real knowledge about education than any of them." "But Clarence," she replied sadly, "maybe they're right. Maybe I am a fool for thinking I can be a teacher at my age." "That's exactly what they want you to think," Clarence said firmly. "That's how prejudice works. It plants seeds of doubt in people's minds." Clarence stayed at Faith's house until noon, trying to lift her spirits. He told stories of teachers he'd known throughout his career, people who started teaching late in life and became some of the most respected educators in the area. "You know what I'm going to do," Clarence said before leaving. "I'll call some of my contacts in education. I know school principals who would value a teacher with your life experience." "No, Clarence," Faith shook her head. "I don't want anyone to hire me out of pity." "Pity?" He laughed. "Faith, you spent 4 years in college, earned excellent grades, never missed a class. Any school would be lucky to have you." But Faith couldn't believe her friend's words. The humiliation at graduation had left a deep wound in her self-esteem, one that seemed unwilling to heal. The following Monday, Amanda Thompson arrived at the college with a strange feeling in her chest. She'd spent the weekend thinking about Faith and couldn't shake the guilt for not intervening during the humiliation. Amanda decided to seek out the head of the education program, Professor Richard Miller, a 55-year-old man known for his strictness and formality. She knocked on his office door and entered without waiting for a response. "Richard,"
"We need to talk about what happened at graduation," Amanda said, getting straight to the point.
"Oh, you mean the comments about the older student?" Richard replied without looking up from his papers. "Young people always joke around. It'll pass." "Jokes?" Amanda felt her indignation grow. "That was public humiliation, Richard. Faith Johnson dedicated 4 years to get there." "Amanda," Richard finally looked at her, "let's be realistic. A 70-year-old woman graduating in education is unusual. It's natural it would draw some remarks." "Remarks or bullying?" Amanda couldn't hide the irritation in her voice. "Look, I understand your concern," Richard leaned back in his chair, "but we can't control what students say. Besides, maybe it's better for everyone if she looks for another field." Amanda left Richard's office even angrier than when she'd entered. The coordinator's condescending attitude showed that the prejudice against Faith didn't just come from the students, but also from the institution itself. That afternoon, Amanda made a decision. She went through Faith's academic records and reviewed all her grades and evaluations. What she found surprised her. Faith had one of the highest averages in her class. Her assignments were always well-researched, her class participation was insightful, and she had never missed an academic commitment. Amanda also discovered something she hadn't known. Faith had volunteered at a community daycare throughout her studies, applying in practice what she learned in theory. The children adored her, and the daycare director had even sent a recommendation letter praising her work. With this information in hand, Amanda began forming a plan. She couldn't change what had happened at graduation, but maybe she could do something to restore Faith's dignity. Amanda looked up contacts at local schools that might be interested in hiring a teacher with Faith's background. She knew many educational institutions valued educators with life experience, especially for working with children from underprivileged communities. During her research, Amanda remembered New Haven Public School, located in an outlying neighborhood of Riverside. The principal, Deborah Parker, was a 40-year-old woman known for her innovative and humanistic approach to education. Amanda decided to call Deborah and tell her about Faith. To her surprise, the principal showed immediate interest. "Amanda," Deborah said over the phone, "I've been searching for months for a teacher to work with 5- and 6-year-olds. Someone with patience and life experience would be perfect for our children." "Deborah, I need to be honest with you," Amanda hesitated. "Faith is 72 years old. Some colleagues question her ability because of her age." 72? Deborah laughed on the other end of the line. "Amanda, my grandmother taught until she was 80. Age in education can be an advantage, not a problem." The conversation with Deborah gave Amanda new hope. Maybe there was a place in the world for a teacher like Faith, far from the prejudices of the college. But Amanda knew she couldn't just call Faith and tell her about the opportunity. The elderly woman was deeply shaken and would likely reject any offer, believing it was out of pity. Amanda needed a subtler strategy. She decided to speak first with Clarence, who seemed to be the only real support Faith had. Amanda found Clarence's number through Faith's emergency contact list at the college. She called on a Wednesday afternoon, introduced herself, and explained her intentions. "Professor Clarence," Amanda said, "I'm worried about Faith's emotional state after what happened at graduation." "Professor Amanda," Clarence sighed. "She's devastated. She won't even talk about looking for a teaching job." "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you," Amanda continued. "I have a proposal that might interest her, but I need your help to present it the right way." Amanda told him about New Haven Public School and Principal Deborah's interest in meeting Faith. Clarence was silent for a long moment before responding. "Professor Amanda," he finally said, "your concern for Faith moves me. But she's deeply hurt right now. Any direct approach will be met with suspicion." "That's why I need your help," Amanda explained. "Could you present the opportunity as if it were a coincidence, like you just happened to hear about it?" Clarence considered the idea. He knew Faith well, and understood she was too proud to accept what she might see as charity. But he also knew she was wasting real talent because of a few cruel young people. "I'll try," said Clarence, "but I can't promise anything. She's really shaken up." The following Thursday, Clarence showed up at Faith's house with a casual air. She greeted him in the living room, still wearing simple clothes and with the sad look that had become her trademark since graduation. Faith, Clarence said, pretending the idea had just occurred to him. You know I still have contacts in education, right? Yes, I know, she replied without much interest. Well, yesterday I ran into Deborah Parker, the principal at New Haven Public School, Clarence continued. She mentioned she's desperate to find a teacher for early childhood education. Faith looked up for the first time. So? Well, Clarence tried to sound casual. She said she wants someone with patience and life experience, not necessarily someone young. In fact, she thinks the kids would benefit from a more mature teacher. Clarence, Faith shook her head. We both know that after what happened at graduation, no one will take me seriously as a teacher. Faith, Clarence leaned forward, this principal wasn't at your graduation. She doesn't know those immature kids. All she knows is that she needs a good teacher. But what if she finds out my age and changes her mind? Faith asked hesitantly. What if she doesn't care? Clarence countered. Faith, you spent 4 years studying for this. You're not going to throw it all away because of a few rude boys, are you? Faith stayed silent for a long time. Part of her wanted to believe there was still a chance, but another part was afraid of facing new humiliation. I don't know, Clarence, she finally said. I need to think. Do think. Clarence stood up to leave. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. After Clarence left, Faith was alone with her thoughts. She went to her bedroom and looked again at the diploma on the dresser. 4 years of her life were summed up in that piece of paper. Faith remembered all the struggles she had faced to get there, the mornings waking up at 5 to study before work, the afternoons in the college library trying to understand complex texts, the nights doing assignments by hand because she didn't know how to use a computer well. She thought of all the times she had been underestimated, not just in college, but throughout her whole life. As a housekeeper, she was always treated as if she were invisible. As a poor woman, she was always ignored. As someone without an education, she was always considered lesser. But now she had the diploma. She had the knowledge. She had the life experience. Maybe it was time to stop letting others define her worth. On Friday, Faith called Clarence. Clarence, she said, her voice still shaky, can you give me that principal's phone number? Of course, Faith. Clarence smiled on the other end of the line. But are you sure? No, she answered honestly. But I'll try anyway. Faith wrote down Deborah Parker's number, but it took her 3 days to gather the courage to call. When she finally did, her hands were shaking so much she almost hung up before anyone answered. New Haven Public School, good morning, a woman's voice greeted. Good morning. Faith took a deep breath. I'd like to speak with Principal Deborah Parker, please. Speaking. How can I help you? My name is Faith Johnson, she said nervously. I heard through Professor Clarence that you're looking for an early childhood education teacher. Oh, yes. Deborah sounded excited. Professor Clarence mentioned he knew someone interested. Would you like to set up a meeting? Yes, I'd like that, Faith answered, trying to keep her voice steady. How about tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon? Deborah suggested. I can show you the school and we can talk about the position. Perfect, Faith agreed. See you tomorrow then. After hanging up, Faith felt a mix of anxiety and hope. It was the first time since graduation that she felt there might still be a chance for her dreams. That night she picked out her best outfit and prepared a folder with her diploma and some projects she had worked on during college. She barely slept, imagining how the conversation with the principal would go. Clarence showed up the next morning to wish her good luck. He found Faith dressed up and nervous, pacing back and forth in the living room. Faith, he said affectionately, you're going to do great. Remember everything you've achieved these past 4 years. But what if she thinks I'm too old? Faith asked for the 10th time. Then she doesn't deserve a teacher like you, Clarence replied. But I have a good feeling about this principal. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. New Haven Public School was located in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Riverside, surrounded by small houses and cracked asphalt streets. Faith arrived 10 minutes early and stood in front of the gate, watching the children play in the yard during recess. They seemed happy and carefree, running around without a worry about judgment or prejudice. For the first time in days, Faith smiled, imagining what it would be like to work with those little ones. "Ms. Faith?" a voice called from behind her. Faith turned and saw a woman in her 40s, with brown hair tied in a bun and a warm smile on her face. It was Deborah Parker, who had come out to greet her personally. "Good afternoon," Faith greeted her, trying to hide her nervousness. "It's so nice to meet you in person," Deborah extended her hand. "Mr. Clarence spoke very highly of you. Shall we go inside?" Deborah led Faith through the school's hallways, showing her the classrooms, the small but well-organized library, and the teacher's lounge. Along the way, she explained the school's philosophy and the challenges they faced. "Our children come from humble backgrounds," Deborah explained as they walked. "Many have only one parent, others live with grandparents or relatives. They need teachers who understand that reality." "I understand that reality," Faith said naturally. "I come from a simple family too." "That's great," Deborah smiled. "Life experience is exactly what we're looking for here." They reached the principal's office, a small but cozy space with plants by the windows and children's drawings hanging on the walls. Deborah offered coffee and sat behind a simple wooden desk. "Miss Faith," Deborah began, "tell me a little about your education." Faith took her diploma from the folder and placed it on the table. "I just graduated with a degree in education from St. Benedict College." Deborah picked up the diploma and examined it carefully. "Congratulations on graduating. Now tell me, how old are you?" Faith's heart raced. It was the question she feared most. "I'm 72. Deborah showed no surprise or hesitation. "And what motivated you to go back to school at this stage in life?" "I've always dreamed of being a teacher," Faith answered honestly. "I worked as a housekeeper for 50 years to make ends meet, but I never forgot that dream." "What an inspiring story," Deborah smiled. "And during your studies, did you do any internships or volunteer work?" "Yes," Faith brightened. "I volunteered at St. Francis Daycare Center all 4 years of my program." "The daycare in the Industrial Park neighborhood?" Deborah asked, surprised. "I know the director there, Mrs. Martha. It's an excellent institution." "Mrs. Martha was very generous with me." Faith smiled timidly. "She let me practice everything I learned in college." Deborah was impressed. The St. Francis Daycare Center had an excellent reputation in the area, and if Faith had volunteered there, it meant she already had hands-on experience with children. "Mrs. Faith," Deborah leaned forward, "I'll be direct with you. I urgently need a teacher for a kindergarten class. There are 23 children, 5 and 6 years old, most of them craving attention." "I'd love to work with them," Faith replied without hesitation. "But I should warn you," Deborah continued, "the salary isn't high. It's the standard rate for public schools, and I know many newly graduated teachers end up looking for private schools that pay better." "The salary isn't my priority," Faith said firmly. "I just want the chance to teach." Deborah smiled. That was exactly the attitude she was looking for in a teacher. "Then would you like to meet the class? They're having their lesson now." "Of course." Faith stood up, feeling butterflies in her stomach. Deborah led her to a colorful classroom where 23 children were sitting in groups, working on a drawing activity. The substitute teacher, a young woman in her 20s, seemed a little overwhelmed trying to keep order. "Children," Deborah got the class's attention. "I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Faith." The kids looked up curiously. Faith stepped forward slowly, feeling more comfortable with each step. Here there was no prejudice or judgment, just genuine curiosity. "Hi, everyone," Faith said warmly. "What beautiful drawings you're making." A girl with curly hair raised her hand. "Teacher, are you someone's grandma here?" Faith laughed. "No, sweetheart. I'm a teacher like you've never seen before." "Why?" a curious boy asked. "Because I studied until I was old to learn how to teach you just right," Faith explained simply. The children seemed to accept the answer without question. To them, Faith was just another interesting adult who had walked into their classroom. Deborah watched the interaction with satisfaction. Faith had a natural way with children. She spoke at their level without being condescending and showed a patience that only came with life experience. "Mrs. Faith," a 6-year-old boy, said, "Are you going to stay here with us?" "If you'd like," Faith replied, glancing at Deborah for confirmation. "Of course we do," several children shouted in unison. Deborah smiled and nodded approvingly. Faith felt her heart race with emotion. For the first time since graduating, someone was welcoming her with open arms. After spending a few more minutes with the children, Deborah and Faith returned to the office to finalize the details. "Mrs. Faith," Deborah said, "I'd like to offer you the position. Can you start on Monday?" "Yes," Faith answered immediately, unable to contain her joy. "Great," Deborah smiled. "I'll prepare the paperwork. Oh, and one more thing. Here, all teachers go by their first names. To the children, you'll be Mrs. Faith." "Mrs. Faith," she repeated, savoring the words. "I like how that sounds." Faith left the school walking on air. She had finally found a place where her age was seen as an advantage, not an obstacle. She could hardly wait to share the news with Clarence. The old teacher was waiting anxiously at home, pacing back and forth in the living room. When he saw Faith walk in with a smile on her face, he immediately knew the news was good. "Well?" he asked, barely able to contain his curiosity. "Clarence," Faith said with shining eyes, "I'm the new teacher at New Haven Public School." Clarence hugged her tightly, feeling tears of joy in his eyes. "I knew it. I knew someone would recognize your worth." "The principal is a wonderful woman," Faith shared excitedly, "and the children welcomed me with open arms. I start on Monday." "What joy, Faith," Clarence said sincerely. "You deserve this opportunity." That night, Faith could hardly sleep from all the excitement. She planned her first lessons, thought of activities that might interest the children, and for the first time since graduation, she truly felt like a teacher. On Monday, Faith arrived at school at 7 in the morning, an hour before classes began. She wanted time to prepare the classroom and familiarize herself with the materials. Deborah greeted her with a smile and walked her to the classroom. "The children are eager to get to know their new teacher better," she said. "Just yesterday, some parents asked about you." "Asked?" Faith grew apprehensive. "What did they want to know?" "Nothing serious," Deborah reassured her. "Just natural curiosity. Many were surprised to hear the new teacher has more life experience than most." At 8 o'clock, the children began arriving. Faith greeted each one at the classroom door, addressing them by name. She had memorized all their names over the weekend, studying the files Deborah had provided. "Good morning, Ryan," she said to a shy boy. "I really liked your drawing on Friday." The boy smiled and walked in with more confidence. Faith repeated this with each child, making specific comments that showed she had paid attention to each of them. The first lesson was a success. Faith told a story about a tree that dreamed of bearing fruit, drawing parallels to the children's own dreams. They listened, fascinated, asking questions and making comments that showed genuine interest. During recess, some children chose to stay in the classroom talking with Faith. She took the chance to get to know them better, asking about their families and interests. "Miss Faith," said a curly-haired girl named Emma, "my grandma is the same age as you." "What a coincidence," Faith smiled. "Where does she live?" "Far away," Emma sighed. "I only see her at Christmas." "That's too bad," Faith said warmly. "I bet you two have so much fun when you're together." "Yes," Emma perked up. "She tells the best stories." "I love telling stories too," Faith revealed. "How about I tell you all a special story every Friday?" The children cheered at the idea. Faith felt a happiness she hadn't known in a long time. Here she wasn't the old woman who shouldn't be studying. She was simply Miss Faith, respected and loved by her students. At the end of the first day, Deborah came by to check in. "So?" the principal asked. "How was your first day?" "Wonderful," Faith answered sincerely. "These children are special." "I'm glad to hear that," Deborah smiled. "And the children liked you too. Several already asked if Miss Faith is staying forever." "As long as you'll have me and my health allows," Faith promised. Over the first few weeks, Faith settled perfectly into the school routine. She arrived early, stayed late, and spent her evenings preparing creative lessons for her students. Her life experience proved to be a real advantage. She had endless patience, knew how to handle tantrums and conflicts, and brought a unique perspective to children's problems. The kids adored her. Faith had a special way of explaining difficult concepts through stories and games. She used her own experience to teach values like perseverance, respect, and kindness. A month after starting work, Faith received an unexpected surprise. Deborah called her into the office and said she'd received a special phone call. "Mrs. Johnson," Deborah said with a mysterious smile, "someone wants to speak with you." "With me?" Faith was confused. "Who?" "Mrs. Martha from St. Francis Daycare Center," Deborah revealed. "She heard you're working here and wants to talk." Faith picked up the phone curiously. Mrs. Martha had been one of her biggest supporters during her volunteer days. "Faith," the familiar voice came through the line, "I heard you got a job as a teacher. How wonderful." "Mrs. Martha," Faith smiled. "How did you find out?" "Riverside is a small town, dear," Martha laughed. "Good news travels fast, and I have a proposal for you." "A proposal?" Faith was intrigued. "I want you to come give a talk here at the daycare," Martha explained, "for the mothers of our children. Many of them are young, didn't get much schooling, and think it's too late to dream. Your story could inspire them." "I don't know, Mrs. Martha." Faith hesitated. "I've never given a talk about my life." "It doesn't have to be formal," Martha assured her. "Just tell your story. How you went back to school, how you graduated, how you made your dream come true. It could make a huge difference in these women's lives." Faith considered the offer. The idea of sharing her experience made her nervous, but it also moved her. Maybe she really could help other women who felt the way she once had. "All right," she finally said. "When would you like me to come?" "How about next Saturday afternoon?" Martha suggested. "I can arrange an informal gathering in the daycare courtyard." "Perfect," Faith agreed. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Faith told Deborah about the invitation. The principal was thrilled with the idea. "That's wonderful, Faith," Deborah said. "You have a truly inspiring story. I'm sure it will touch these women's hearts." During the week leading up to the talk, Faith prepared carefully. She didn't just want to tell her story, she also wanted to give practical advice to women who might want to return to school. Clarence helped her organize her thoughts. "Faith," he said during one of their preparation sessions, "remember to talk about the struggles too. People need to know it wasn't easy, but it was possible." "You're right," Faith agreed. "I'll talk about studying late at night, about the prejudice in college, about all the obstacles." "And don't forget to mention the reward," Clarence added. "How you feel now, working with the kids, living your dream." On the day of the talk, Faith arrived at St. Francis Daycare Center with butterflies in her stomach. Mrs. Martha had set up a gathering in the courtyard with chairs in a circle and a simple microphone. About 15 women attended, mostly young mothers in their 20s and 30s. Some brought their little ones, who played in the park while the mothers listened. "Everyone," Mrs. Martha began, "this is Faith Johnson, who volunteered here for 4 years while attending college. Now she's a real teacher." The women applauded politely. Faith stood up, holding the microphone with trembling hands. "Good afternoon," she began softly. "My name is Faith, and I'm 72 years old." A murmur of surprise rippled through the group. Some women exchanged looks of disbelief. "I know what you must be thinking. What can a woman my age possibly teach you?" Faith continued. "But I want to share a story that might inspire you." Faith recounted her entire journey. Her impoverished childhood, early marriage, years working as a housekeeper, the dream of becoming a teacher that never died, the decision to return to school at 68. "Many people called me crazy," she said. "They said I was too old, that I was wasting time and money, but I knew if I didn't try, I'd regret it for the rest of my life." The women listened in absolute silence. Some discreetly wiped away tears. "I won't lie to you," Faith went on. "It was very hard. There were nights I wanted to give up. At college, many classmates treated me as if I were invisible. Some even mocked me." "And how did you handle it?" asked a young woman with brown hair. "I remembered my dream," Faith replied. "And I thought of the children I wanted to teach. That gave me the strength to keep going." A woman around 25 raised her hand. "Miss Johnson, I dropped out when I got pregnant at 16. Now my daughter is 9 and I've always wanted to go back, but I think it's too late. Sweetheart, Faith said warmly, you're 25. I started at 68. If it's not too late for me, imagine for you. But who will take care of my daughter while I study? The woman asked. That's a real challenge, Faith acknowledged. But there are solutions. You can study at night, ask family for help, or even bring your daughter along to study with you. The important thing is not to give up before trying. The conversation lasted 2 hours. The women asked many questions about balancing studies with family responsibilities, handling prejudice, finding motivation in tough times. Faith answered each one with honesty and kindness. She realized many of these women had dreams like hers, but felt trapped by circumstances. Listen, a 30-year-old woman said at the end, did you all notice Ms. Johnson did this all on her own? If she could do it, so can we. The others enthusiastically agreed. Faith felt moved seeing her story had truly touched them. Ms. Martha approached her after the meeting. Faith, she said with teary eyes, you have no idea how much good you did here today. Several women have already asked me how to go back to school. What joy, Faith smiled. If I can help even one person achieve their dreams, it's all been worth it. On her way home, Faith reflected on the experience. For the first time since her humiliating graduation, she felt truly proud of her journey. Her struggles had served a greater purpose, inspiring others. In the following weeks, Faith received several visits at school. Some were women from the talk, wanting details about how she'd managed her studies. One of them, the 25-year-old who dropped out, appeared one Thursday with exciting news. Ms. Johnson, she said with a radiant smile, I enrolled in night school. I'm finishing high school. How wonderful, Faith hugged her. I know you'll succeed. It's because of you, the young woman said emotionally. After hearing your story, I realized I had no excuse not to try. Stories like this became frequent. Faith discovered her life experience, far from being an obstacle, was actually a valuable resource that could help others. Deborah noticed the positive impact Faith was having not just on her children, but on the entire community. The principal decided to harness this influence on a broader scale. Faith, Deborah said one Friday afternoon, I have an idea. How about we organize a project here at the school, something that involves our children's families? What kind of project? Faith asked, intrigued. A study group for parents who want to return to school, Deborah explained. You could coordinate it, offer guidance, share your experience. Deborah, that's a wonderful idea, Faith said enthusiastically. Many of our children's parents are young and didn't get much schooling. Exactly, Deborah agreed. And who better to guide them than someone who's been through the same situation? The project was approved by the school's education coordination team. Deborah secured permission to use the school's space on Saturday afternoons for the study group meetings. Faith threw herself into planning the project with excitement. She researched local schools offering evening and weekend classes, gathered information on scholarships and financial aid programs, and prepared career guidance materials. The first meeting was scheduled for a Saturday in October. Faith arrived early to set up the room and prepare coffee for the participants. She was nervous, but also thrilled at the chance to help even more people. To her surprise, 22 people showed up for the first session. They were parents of all ages, mostly young but some in their 40s. Everyone, Faith began. What a joy to see so many people interested in going back to school. Shall we introduce ourselves? Each participant shared a bit of their story. Faith was moved to hear experiences so similar to her own. Dreams cut short, financial struggles, missed opportunities. One woman, Rose, 45 years old, particularly touched her heart. Teacher Faith, Rose said, I left school at 14 to work and help at home. Now my daughter is 15 and in high school. She always asks me why I didn't study more. I want to show her it's never too late. Rose, Faith said warmly, your daughter already has the best example possible, a mother who doesn't give up on her dreams. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Faith presented the study options available in the area, explained scholarships and financial aid, and gave practical advice on balancing school with work and family. The hardest part, she said at the end, isn't age or practical challenges. It's believing you deserve it and are capable. It took me 68 years to believe that. You're all much younger and have so much more time ahead. By the end of the session, 15 people had signed up for the ongoing study group. Faith was overjoyed by the response. Over the following months, the group met every Saturday. Faith closely followed each participant's progress, offering emotional support during tough moments and celebrating every small victory. Rose was one of the first to enroll in adult education. She came to meetings sharing stories about her classes, her fears, and her achievements. "Teacher Faith," she said one Saturday, "my daughter is helping me with homework. Now she's the one teaching me math." "How beautiful, Rose," Faith smiled. "You're learning together." "It's true," Rose agreed. "And you know what she told me the other day? That she's proud of me for not giving up." Stories like Rose's multiplied. The study group became a cornerstone of the community, and people from neighboring areas began seeking Faith's guidance. Amanda Thompson, who had been instrumental in helping Faith Johnson find her place as a teacher, learned about the success of the project through Deborah. The two principals knew each other and maintained professional contact. "Amanda," Deborah said during a principals' meeting, "you need to see the work Teacher Faith is doing here at the school." "How is she adjusting?" Amanda asked, always concerned about Faith's well-being. "Adjusting," Deborah laughed. "Amanda, she hasn't just adjusted, she's become one of the most beloved teachers in the school, and the community outreach program she started is changing lives." Amanda was moved to hear about Faith's success. She had always believed in the older woman's potential, but never imagined she would achieve so much in such a short time. "Deborah," Amanda said, "I'd love to visit the school and see her work in person." "That would be wonderful," Deborah agreed. "I'm sure Faith would be thrilled to see you again." The visit was scheduled for a Thursday in November. Amanda arrived at New Haven Public School in the late afternoon, just as Faith was finishing her activities with the children. Deborah led her to the classroom, where they found Faith helping a little boy with a drawing. The scene was touching. The elderly teacher sitting beside the child, guiding his small hand with endless patience. "Faith," Deborah called softly, "you have a special visitor." Faith looked up and was surprised to see Amanda standing in the doorway. The two women locked eyes for a moment, remembering their last meeting at the college. "Professor Amanda," Faith stood and went to greet her. "What a wonderful surprise." "Faith," Amanda smiled warmly, "I came to see the amazing work you're doing here." "Amazing work," Faith said modestly. "I'm just doing what I've always dreamed of, teaching children." "I heard it's much more than that," Amanda replied. "Deborah told me about your family outreach program." Faith gave Amanda a tour of the school, showing her classroom, the children's work, and telling her about the study group she led on Saturdays. "Faith," Amanda said at the end of the visit, "you've truly found your place. These children and families are lucky to have you." "Thank you, Professor Amanda," Faith said emotionally, "and thank you for not stepping in that day at graduation." "What do you mean?" Amanda was confused. "If you had stepped in," Faith explained, "I might never have gone through the humiliation that helped me grow. I might never have learned that my worth doesn't depend on others' opinions." Amanda grew thoughtful. She had always blamed herself for not defending Faith at graduation, but now she understood that sometimes people need certain experiences to discover their own strength. "Faith," Amanda said before leaving, "you've taught me a valuable lesson today about how hardships can make us stronger." "Life itself is a lesson," Faith replied wisely. "The important thing is being willing to learn." After Amanda's visit, Faith reflected on her journey. In less than a year, she had gone from the humiliation of graduation to becoming a respected teacher and community leader. The pain of that day had turned into motivation to help others. The study group continued to grow. By the end of the year, Faith was mentoring over 30 people at different stages of returning to school. Some were finishing elementary education, others high school, and a few were even preparing for college entrance exams. The greatest success story was Rose, who not only finished high school, but decided to take the entrance exam for education. "Teacher Faith," she said at one of the last meetings of the year, "I want to follow in your footsteps. I want to be a teacher too." "Rose," Faith smiled with tears in her eyes, It would be an honor to have you as a colleague. But I'm afraid, Rose confessed. What if I can't keep up with the course? Remember what I always say, Faith said warmly. If I could do it at 68, you can do it at 45. The school year came to an end with a closing celebration at the school. Faith's children prepared a special performance for her, singing a song they had composed about dreams coming true. Teacher Faith, dear teacher, the children sang, you taught us that it's never too late to dream. Faith cried with emotion throughout the performance. Those children had become much more than her students. They were little friends who inspired her every day. Deborah took the opportunity during the celebration to make an important announcement. Everyone, she said, taking the microphone, I want to share that the project led by Teacher Faith has been so successful that the Department of Education has decided to expand it to other public schools. The auditorium erupted in applause. Faith was surprised and moved by the news. This means, Deborah continued, that our beloved Teacher Faith will have the chance to bring her work to even more families. After the celebration, Faith and Clarence walked home together. The old teacher watched his friend with pride and satisfaction. Faith, he said, remember how devastated you were after graduation? Of course I remember, she sighed. I thought my life was over. And look how far you've come, Clarence smiled. Beloved teacher, coordinator of a social project, an example to dozens of people. Clarence, Faith stopped walking and looked at him. Do you know what makes me proudest? What? The fact that those young people who mocked me at graduation were wrong, she said firmly. I proved that age is no barrier to anything. More than that, Clarence added, you proved that life experience is an asset, not an obstacle. They arrived at Faith's house, where she made coffee so they could talk a little longer. At the kitchen table where she had studied for 4 years, they planned what the next year would look like. Faith, Clarence said, have you ever thought about writing a book about your experience? A book? She laughed. Clarence, who would want to read about the life of a housekeeper who became a teacher? All the women you've inspired, he replied. Your story needs to be shared with more people. The idea stayed in Faith's mind during the summer break. She began jotting down her memories, the challenges she faced, the lessons she learned. Without realizing it, she was starting to write the book Clarence had suggested. When classes resumed in February, Faith felt even more confident and motivated. Her children welcomed her with excitement, and the study group returned with many new participants. Among them was an 18-year-old named Patricia. She had gotten pregnant at 16 and dropped out of school, but wanted to return to give her child a better future. Teacher Faith, Patricia said at the first meeting, I'm scared to go back to school. I think people will judge me for being a young mother. Patricia, Faith said kindly, judgment will always exist. What matters is not letting it stop us from pursuing our dreams. But it's different, Patricia insisted. You faced prejudice for being older. I'll face it for being younger and a single mother. Sweetheart, Faith smiled. Prejudice is prejudice, no matter the reason. The way to fight it is the same, with dignity, persistence, and focus on our goals. Patricia became one of the most dedicated participants in the group. Faith kept a close eye on her, offering both practical and emotional support. When Patricia secured a spot in Knight High School, the two celebrated as if it were a personal victory. During her second year as a teacher, Faith also faced new challenges. Her class that year included several children with learning difficulties who required special attention. One of the most complex cases was Michael, a 6-year-old boy who struggled to focus and often disrupted the class. Other teachers had already suggested he be transferred to a special needs class. Faith, however, saw potential in Michael. She noticed the boy was highly intelligent but needed different approaches to learn. With patience and creativity, she developed specific strategies to help him. Michael, she said one day after seeing him frustrated with a writing exercise, how about you tell me the story instead of writing it? Then we can write it together. The strategy worked. Michael had a rich, creative imagination, but expressed himself better verbally than in writing. Faith used this skill as a bridge to develop his other abilities. Michael's mother, a young and concerned woman, noticed the change in her son at home. Ms. Faith, she said during a meeting, I don't know how you did it, but Michael loves coming to school now. Every child has their own pace and way of learning, Faith explained. Michael just needed someone to figure his out. Her success with Michael caught the attention of other teachers at the school. Many began seeking Faith's advice on handling challenging children. Faith, a young teacher said one afternoon, how do you have so much patience? Sometimes I feel overwhelmed by some of my students. Sweetheart, Faith replied with a smile, patience comes with experience. When you raise a child, work 50 years as a housekeeper, and face all the prejudice I've faced, you'll find you have patience for anything. Deborah watched with satisfaction as Faith had not only become an excellent teacher, but also a mentor to younger colleagues. The principal decided to formalize this role. Faith, Deborah said one Friday, I have a proposal for you. How would you feel about, in addition to teaching, also helping mentor our newer teachers? How do you mean? Faith asked, intrigued. A mentorship program, Deborah explained. You'd guide early career teachers, sharing your experience and wisdom. Deborah, it would be an honor, Faith accepted immediately. I love helping people grow professionally. The mentorship program was implemented in the second semester. Faith was assigned to guide 3 newly graduated teachers who were struggling in their first teaching experiences. One of them was Lauren, a 23-year-old who had graduated from the same college where Faith had once faced humiliation. Ironically, Lauren had been mentored by Professor Richard Miller, the same man who had dismissed the prejudice Faith endured. Ms. Faith, Lauren said during their first mentoring session, I'm desperate. I can't maintain discipline in my classroom. The kids don't respect me, and I don't think I'm cut out to be a teacher. Lauren, Faith said understandingly, every teacher goes through moments like this at the start of their career. What matters is not giving up. But you never went through this, Lauren replied. I heard you're a natural with children. Faith laughed. Sweetheart, do you know how old I am? 73, right? Exactly, Faith confirmed. Do you think I learned to be a teacher overnight? I have 73 years of life experience. You have 23. It's only natural that I find some things easier. So, there's hope for me? Lauren asked with a timid smile. There's all the hope in the world, Faith assured her. Let's work together to develop your skills. Faith began mentoring Lauren closely, observing her classes and offering practical suggestions. She taught classroom management techniques she'd learned not from books, but from real-life experience with children. Lauren, she said after watching a challenging lesson, when a child is restless, try to understand what's going on with them first. Sometimes the issue isn't a lack of discipline, it's hunger, tiredness, or trouble at home. How do I figure that out? Lauren asked. By talking, Faith replied simply. Sit beside the child at their level and ask how they're feeling. Lauren followed the advice and was surprised by the results. Many of the children she'd labeled problematic were simply going through hardships that needed attention, not punishment. Faith's mentoring proved so effective that other public schools began requesting her guidance for their new teachers. Faith, Deborah said in a meeting, the Department of Education wants to expand your mentoring work district-wide. Would you be willing to visit other schools as a consultant? Of course, Faith agreed enthusiastically. The more teachers I can help, the better. Her consulting work exposed her to diverse educational realities. She visited schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, downtown, and even rural schools near Riverside. Everywhere she faced unique challenges, but found her life experience valuable in every context. Young teachers, regardless of location, needed the same support. Someone experienced who believed in them and helped them find their way. During a visit to a rural school, Faith encountered a deeply moving situation. The school served children of farm workers, many from migrant families constantly moving for work. Teacher Faith, said the principal, a 50-year-old woman named Vera, our biggest struggle is with children who switch schools multiple times a year. They arrive behind academically and don't stay long enough to adjust. How do you handle it? Faith asked. We do our best, Vera sighed, but it's very hard. The teachers get frustrated because they can't track each child's progress. After observing classes and talking with the teachers, Faith realized the issue wasn't incompetence but a lack of specific strategies for such a transient student population. "Vera," Faith said at the end of her visit, "have you considered creating a special welcoming system for these children?" "How so?" "A protocol to quickly assess each new child's level, identify their specific needs, and create a personalized adjustment plan," Faith explained. "That sounds complicated," Vera hesitated. "Actually, it's simpler than it seems," Faith smiled. "It's what any grandmother would do. Get to know the child, understand where they're from, and help them feel at home." Faith spent the weekend drafting a detailed plan for the rural school. She designed simple assessment forms, integration activities, and a tracking system that wouldn't overwhelm the teachers. When she presented the plan to Vera on Monday, the principal was amazed. "Faith," she said, "this is exactly what we needed. How did you manage to think of all this so quickly?" 73 years of experience, Faith replied with a smile. "You learn to adapt to any situation." The plan was implemented at the rural school and worked beyond expectations. The migrant children began to adjust more quickly, and the teachers felt more confident handling classroom diversity. News of the success reached the Department of Education, which invited Faith to present her methodology at a seminar for rural school principals in the region. "Faith," said the Secretary of Education, a 60-year-old man named Paul Henderson, "your work is making a real difference in the lives of many children. We'd like to document your methodologies so they can be replicated in other cities." "Secretary Paul," Faith answered humbly, "all I do is apply the common sense life has taught me. There's nothing revolutionary about it." "But that's exactly what makes your work so valuable," Paul Henderson insisted. "You translate life experience into practical solutions for education." The seminar was scheduled for a Saturday in June at the Department of Education auditorium. Faith prepared carefully, organizing her presentation around the real cases she had faced. On the day of the seminar, the auditorium was packed with principals, coordinators, and teachers from across the region. Faith stepped onto the stage feeling nervous but determined. "Good afternoon," she began, looking at the audience full of educators. "My name is Faith Johnson. I'm 73 years old, and for the past 2 years I've been an early childhood teacher." A murmur of interest spread through the auditorium. Many of those present had heard of Faith, but this was the first time they were seeing her in person. "I know you must be wondering what a rookie teacher my age can teach experienced educators," Faith continued, "but I want to share with you some lessons only life experience can give." Faith recounted her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the practical solutions she had developed. She spoke about Michael, the boy who struggled with focus, about Lauren, the young teacher who needed guidance, about the migrant children at the rural school. "Education," she said at one point, "isn't just about passing on knowledge, it's about understanding people. And to understand people, there's no better recipe than having lived a lot and observed a lot." The audience listened in reverent silence. Some educators scribbled notes frantically, while others simply absorbed her words of wisdom. "When a child is restless in class," Faith gave a practical example, "instead of thinking about punishment, I think about my experience as a grandmother. What would a grandmother do? She'd get close, ask what's wrong, offer a hug if needed." "But Ms. Faith," interrupted a principal, "what about discipline? We can't just be affectionate all the time." "Who said affection and discipline are opposites?" Faith replied. "A loving grandmother sets boundaries precisely because she loves. Discipline with care is far more effective than discipline with authority." The presentation lasted an hour and a half. At the end, the audience rose in a prolonged standing ovation. Faith was moved by the warm reception. During the break, several educators approached her with more specific questions and to exchange contact information. For the first time since becoming a teacher, Faith felt truly valued. "Ms. Faith," said an urban school principal, "would you consider visiting our school? We have some challenging cases that could benefit from your approach." "Of course," Faith replied. "It would be my pleasure to help." In the following months, Faith received invitations from dozens of schools. Her schedule filled up with visits, lectures, and consultations. Deborah had to redistribute some of her responsibilities so Faith could meet all the demands. "Faith," Deborah said one evening, "you've become a celebrity in the education field around here." "A celebrity?" Faith laughed. "Deborah, I'm just a teacher doing my job." "An exceptional teacher," Deborah corrected, "and one who's inspiring changes across the entire school system." The consulting work led Faith into increasingly diverse situations. She was called to help schools dealing with violence, schools with low academic performance, and schools struggling with strained relationships between teachers and families. In each case, Faith applied the same philosophy: treat every person as a unique individual, use life experience as a tool for understanding, and approach complex problems with simple, common-sense solutions. One of the most challenging situations was at a school in Brookside, where there was constant tension between teachers and parents. The teachers complained that parents weren't involved in their children's education, while the parents accused the teachers of being prejudiced. "Ms. Johnson," said the principal, Faith, "the situation here is unbearable. Parent meetings turn into arguments, teachers feel disrespected, and the children suffer in this tense environment." Faith observed the school for an entire week. She attended classes, sat in on meetings, and spoke individually with teachers, parents, and staff. What she discovered was that both sides had valid reasons for their complaints, but didn't know how to communicate constructively. "Faith," she said at the end of the observation week, "the problem here isn't a lack of parental interest or teacher bias, it's a lack of mutual understanding." "How so?" "The parents in this community work hard, often two jobs, to support their families," Faith explained. "When they miss meetings or events, it's not disinterest, it's lack of time, and the teachers interpret their absence as neglect." "And the teachers?" Faith asked. "The teachers are dedicated, but they come from different social realities than the families they serve," Faith continued. "Sometimes their language or suggestions unintentionally sound condescending to the parents. So how do we fix this?" "By building bridges," Faith smiled. "I'll propose some activities to help each side understand the other." Faith organized a series of informal gatherings between teachers and families. Instead of formal meetings at school, she suggested activities like park picnics, craft workshops, and even a collaborative community festival. The first event was a Saturday breakfast where each family brought something to share. The teachers attended as guests, not authority figures. "Everyone," Faith said at the start, "today we won't talk about grades or behavior. Let's just get to know each other as people." The strategy worked. Without the pressure of a formal school meeting, teachers and parents could talk naturally. The teachers learned about the real challenges families faced, and the parents saw the teachers as caring individuals who wanted the best for their children. "Ms. Johnson," one mother said at the end of the breakfast, "I always thought the teachers judged me because I work so much and can't help my son with his homework. And I always assumed you didn't care about your child's education," admitted a listening teacher. "Now I understand you're working hard to give him a better life." Meetings like these became regular at the school. The tense atmosphere was gradually replaced by one of collaboration and mutual understanding. The success of Faith's intervention at the school in Brookside caught the attention of other educational networks. She began receiving invitations not just from public schools but also from state and even private institutions. "Faith," Clarence said during one of his visits, "do you realize the scale of what's happening? You've become a reference in education across the entire region." "Clarence," Faith sighed, "sometimes the responsibility scares me. I'm just a woman who always wanted to be a teacher." "But that's exactly what makes you special," Clarence explained. "You're not trying to revolutionize education with complex theories. You're applying simple wisdom to real situations." "Do you think I should keep accepting all these invitations?" Faith asked. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drifting away from the children, which was what I truly wanted to do." "Faith," Clarence said warmly, "your children will always be your priority. But now you have the chance to multiply your impact by helping other teachers be better with their own children." Clarence's reflection made sense to Faith. She decided to continue her consulting work, but set clear boundaries to avoid overloading herself or neglecting her direct work with the children. During her third year as a teacher, Faith faced a new personal challenge. Clarence, her dear friend and supporter, began showing signs of frailty due to his advanced age. "Faith," he said one autumn afternoon, I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it, Clarence?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his voice. "I'm 78 years old," he said slowly. "My health isn't what it used to be. I think it's time to slow down." Faith's heart tightened. Clarence had been her steadfast companion on this journey, and the thought of losing him even gradually frightened her. "Clarence," she said, her voice trembling, "you're my best friend. I can't imagine my life without your advice." "And you won't have to," he smiled. "Just in smaller doses. Besides, look at you now, a respected teacher, mentor to other educators, community leader. You don't need me like you used to." "I'll always need you," Faith said, holding her friend's hand. "And I'll always be here," Clarence promised, maybe just not with the same energy as before. This conversation made Faith reflect on the passage of time and how the important people in our lives may change roles as they age. She decided to make the most of the time she still had with Clarence, visiting him more often and including him in her projects whenever possible. At the end of that year, the Riverside Department of Education decided to honor Faith with an award in recognition of her exceptional contributions to public education. "Faith," Secretary Paul Henderson said during the ceremony, "in just 3 years as a teacher, you've transformed not only the lives of your students, but also how our school system views education." The ceremony took place at the Municipal Theatre, attended by hundreds of educators, local officials, and families of the children Faith had impacted. Deborah gave an emotional speech about Faith's work at New Haven Public School. "When Faith arrived at our school," she said, "she brought more than teaching knowledge. She brought life wisdom, patience, and a genuine love for education that inspired our entire school community." Lauren, the young teacher mentored by Faith, also spoke at the ceremony. "Professor Faith," she said with tears in her eyes, "you taught me that being a teacher isn't just about mastering content. It's about understanding people, embracing differences, and believing in each student's potential." When it was Faith's turn to speak, she stepped onto the stage with visible emotion. She looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces: her children, the parents from the study group, fellow teachers, and Clarence in the front row, smiling proudly. "Friends," Faith began, "4 years ago, when I graduated with my degree in education, I went through the most humiliating moment of my life. Younger colleagues mocked me, questioned my ability, and made me feel like an outsider in the world of education. A respectful silence filled the theater. Today," she continued, "I'm here receiving an award for my contributions to this very same field that some thought I didn't belong in. And do you know what that taught me?" Faith paused, looking directly at the audience. "It taught me that our worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by the positive impact we make in people's lives. It taught me that life experience is as valuable as any diploma, and it taught me that it's never, ever too late to follow our dreams." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Faith went on with her speech, talking about the importance of valuing educators of all ages and backgrounds, and how generational diversity can enrich a school environment. "I want to dedicate this award," she said at the end, "to everyone who, like me, once believed it was too late to dream. It's never too late. Never give up." After the ceremony, Faith was surrounded by people eager to congratulate her. Among them, to her surprise, was Amanda Thompson. "Faith," Amanda said as she approached, "what an inspiring speech. You've become exactly the kind of educator I always knew you could be." "Professor Amanda," Faith smiled, "it's so good to see you here. Thank you for believing in me when few others did." "Actually," Amanda said with a shy smile, "I have a confession to make." "A confession?" "I didn't just stumble upon the job opening at New Haven Public School by chance," Amanda revealed. "I called Deborah, told her about you, and asked her to consider your application." Faith was surprised for a moment, then smiled. "So you were my fairy godmother?" "Let's just say I opened a door," Amanda said humbly. "You were the one who did all the hard work to walk through it and shine on the other side." The two women embraced, moved. It was the symbolic closing of a journey that had begun with humiliation and turned into triumph. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now let's continue. In her 4th year as a teacher, Faith faced the challenge of balancing her growing responsibilities. Alongside her regular classes, she coordinated the Saturday study group, consulted for several schools, and had become a sought-after mentor for educators across the region. Success, however, also brought unexpected pressures. Faith began receiving invitations to speak at events in other cities, write articles for education magazines, and even give interviews for local TV programs. "Faith," Deborah said in a meeting, "you need to learn to say no to some of these invitations. You're stretching yourself too thin." "I know, Deborah," Faith sighed, "but it's hard to turn down help when I know I can make a difference in people's lives." "But you can't help everyone," Deborah said with concern. "And your students here at school need all of you, not someone split between 1,000 commitments." Deborah's observation made Faith reflect on her priorities. She decided to set stricter criteria for accepting outside invitations, always prioritizing her direct work with the children. One of the most touching moments that year was running into Tyler Wilson, the young man who had led the mockery at her graduation ceremony 4 years earlier. The encounter happened by chance on a Saturday afternoon when Faith was grocery shopping in her neighborhood. She was picking out fruit when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Ms. Johnson." She turned and saw Tyler, now a little more mature, accompanied by a young woman and a small child. "Tyler?" Faith said, surprised. "How are you?" "I'm good, thank you," he replied, looking slightly embarrassed. "This is my wife Amanda and my daughter Sophie." "Nice to meet you," Faith smiled at the family. "Ms. Johnson," Tyler hesitated for a moment. I wanted to apologize for what happened at graduation." Faith looked at him carefully. The arrogant young man had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely remorseful. "Tyler," she said gently, "that was a long time ago. You don't need to worry about it." "But I do," he insisted. "What I did was cruel and unfair. After I graduated, I worked in a few schools and met some older teachers who were exceptional. I realized how wrong I was about you." "And what do you do now?" Faith asked, changing the subject to spare him further discomfort. "I'm a high school teacher," Tyler replied. "And you know what's funny? I use a lot of the techniques I've heard about from your work. Some of my colleagues have attended your workshops." "What a coincidence," Faith smiled. "And how are you liking the profession?" "I love it," Tyler said sincerely, "especially working with teenagers everyone else sees as troubled. I've learned that often the problem isn't the student, it's how we treat them." The conversation lasted a few more minutes, during which Tyler shared about his work with at-risk youth. Faith was impressed by the young man's transformation. "Tyler," she said before they parted, "you've become exactly the kind of educator our children need, someone who understands everyone deserves a chance." "Thank you, Ms. Johnson," Tyler said, moved, "and thank you for teaching me a lesson in dignity that day at graduation. Your reaction, or rather your lack of an angry reaction, stuck with me more than any scolding ever could." After they said goodbye, Faith reflected on the encounter all the way home. It was comforting to know that even those who had hurt her in the past had learned and grown. That evening she told Clarence about the meeting. He was staying with her for a while due to some health issues. "See, Faith," the old teacher said, "sometimes we plant seeds without realizing it. Your dignity that difficult day ended up teaching that young man an important lesson." "It's true," Faith agreed. "We never know how our actions might influence others." "And now, he's using what he learned to help other young people," Clarence added. "That's how good spreads in the world." During her 5th year as a teacher, Faith experienced some of the most rewarding moments of her career. Several members of her study group had achieved their educational goals. Rose, the 45-year-old woman who wanted to follow in Faith's footsteps, had passed the entrance exam for education and was now in her 2nd year of college. "Ms. Johnson," Rose said during a visit to the school, "I want you to know you've completely changed my life. Not just for encouraging me to study, but for showing me that women our age have so much to offer the world." "Rose," Faith replied emotionally, "you changed your own life. I just pointed the way." "And my daughter," Rose continued. She was so proud when she saw me studying that she improved her own grades. Now we do homework together. Patricia, the young mother who had returned to school, also managed to finish high school and was working as an administrative assistant at a local company. Teacher Faith, Patricia said during a study group meeting, I got a better job, and now I can give my son a more dignified life. All thanks to the encouragement I received here. Stories like these kept multiplying. The study group had become a reference in the community, and people from distant neighborhoods sought Faith for guidance. The work also earned academic recognition. Riverside State University invited Faith to participate in a roundtable discussion on adult education alongside renowned researchers in the field. Teacher Faith, the event coordinator said, your practical experience perfectly complements the theoretical research our professors develop. It would be an honor to have you with us. Faith accepted the invitation, but confessed to Deborah that she was nervous. Deborah, she said, I'll be speaking to an audience of college professors. What if they think I don't have enough academic credentials? Faith, Deborah laughed. You have something many academics don't. Real-world experience. Trust your knowledge. The roundtable was a success. Faith presented practical cases from her work, demonstrating how educational principles could be applied simply and effectively. The college professors were impressed by the depth of her observations. Teacher Faith, one researcher said afterward, your strategies should be studied and documented academically. Have you ever thought of writing about your experiences? The suggestion to document her work echoed others Faith had received. Clarence had been insisting for months that she write a book, and now even academics were suggesting the same. Maybe it's time to really put these experiences on paper, Faith thought. During the year-end break, she began organizing her notes and memories. The book project took shape, structured around the main challenges she had faced and the solutions she had developed. Her 6th year as a teacher brought an unexpected opportunity. The Riverside Department of Education was invited to present its best teaching practices at a statewide education conference, and Faith was chosen as one of the representatives. Faith, said Secretary Paul Henderson, we want you to present your work on intergenerational education and community integration. It's a model other cities would love to learn from. But Secretary, Faith hesitated, this conference isn't for someone at my level. It's for experts, researchers. Faith, Paul Henderson interrupted, you are an expert at making education work in real life. The conference would be held in Chicago at the Convention Center. It would be the first time Faith presented her work outside Riverside to an audience of thousands of educators from across the state. Deborah offered to accompany her. Faith, she said, I won't let you face this alone. We're a team. Thank you, Deborah, Faith said gratefully. Your presence will give me courage. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Faith prepared intensively. She organized slides with photos of her students, testimonials from study group participants, and data on the results achieved. Clarence, despite his fragile health, insisted on helping with the preparations. Faith, he said one afternoon, you'll represent all of us teachers who believe education is about people, not just numbers. Clarence, Faith smiled, you always know just what to say to calm my nerves. Because I've known you for years, he replied, and I know you have something special to offer the world of education. On the day of the conference, Faith arrived at the Convention Center, accompanied by Deborah and a small delegation from the Riverside Department of Education. The Convention Center was impressive, with thousands of participants milling through the halls. Wow, Faith murmured, awed by the scale of the event. I never imagined I'd be in a place like this. And you deserve to be here, Deborah said firmly. Remember everything you've accomplished these past few years. Faith's presentation was scheduled for the afternoon in a room that seated 500. When they arrived, the room was packed, with people even standing in the back. Seems your reputation arrived before you, Deborah remarked, eyeing the crowd. The moderator introduced Faith as an educator who proves life experience is the best qualification for teaching. She stepped onto the stage with butterflies in her stomach, but also a confidence she'd built over the years. Good afternoon, she began, looking at the audience full of educators. My name is Faith Johnson. I'm 75 years old, and for the past 6 years I've been an early childhood teacher. As usual, her age sparked murmurs of interest in the crowd. Today, I want to talk to you about something I've discovered in these years of teaching, that education is fundamentally about building bridges. Bridges between generations, between cultures, between social classes, between dreams and reality. Faith shared her personal story, the challenges she'd faced, and especially the projects she'd developed at New Haven Public School. She showed photos of her children, shared testimonials from parents in the study group, and presented concrete data on the results. Intergenerational education, she explained, isn't just about an older teacher instructing younger children. It's about creating environments where different generations learn from one another. She gave practical examples: grandparents who came to school to tell stories to the children, teenagers who taught technology to adults in the study group, children who visited nursing homes to perform. When a 6-year-old teaches a 60-year-old how to use a tablet, Faith said, both come away transformed. The child learns patience and respect for elders. The older adult learns that age isn't a barrier to learning new things. The audience listened intently, many taking notes. Faith could tell her message was resonating with these experienced educators. What I've discovered, she continued, is that our differences aren't obstacles to education, they're resources. Every person, regardless of age, has something unique to contribute to the learning process. Faith ended her presentation by sharing Michael's story, the boy she'd transformed through patient, individualized teaching. Michael is in 3rd grade now, she said, moved. He's one of the top students in the school and wants to be a teacher when he grows up. That reminds me every day why I chose this profession, to show every child they have limitless potential. The applause was warm and prolonged. During the Q&A session, educators from various cities asked how to implement similar projects in their own communities. Professor Faith asked a school principal from Santos, "How can we convince the school community to accept older teachers?" "Not by trying to convince them with words," Faith replied, "but by showing them with results. Let the work speak for itself." "And how do we handle age discrimination in the educational environment?" asked a curriculum coordinator. "The same way we handle any prejudice," Faith said firmly, "with dignity, competence, and the certainty that our worth doesn't depend on others' opinions." After the presentation, Faith was surrounded by dozens of educators eager to exchange experiences and contacts. Several departments of education invited her for visits and consultations. "Faith," said the Department of Education secretary from a small town, "I'd love to bring your methodology to our schools. Could we arrange a visit?" "Of course," Faith answered. "It would be my pleasure to share what I've learned." On the way back to Riverside, Deborah commented on the success of the presentation. "Faith," she said, "do you realize you've become a statewide reference in education?" "Deborah," Faith sighed, "sometimes I'm overwhelmed by how far my work has reached. I never imagined a simple early childhood teacher could influence so many people." "But you're not just a simple teacher," Deborah corrected. "You're an educator who found a unique way to make a difference in the world." Back in Riverside, Faith resumed her routine, but now with a broader perspective. Invitations for lectures and consultations multiplied, and she had to be even more selective to avoid overextending herself. One invitation that moved her deeply came from St. Benedict College, where she had graduated years earlier. The new coordinator of the education program, who had replaced Professor Richard Miller, wanted her to speak to the graduating class. "Professor Faith," the coordinator said over the phone, "we want our students to hear your story. It's an inspiring journey of perseverance and professional fulfillment." Faith accepted the invitation with a mix of emotion and nervousness. It would be the first time she returned to that auditorium where she had been humiliated years before. "Clarence," she told her friend, "I'm going to speak at my old college, in the same place where some immature young people tried to belittle you," Clarence finished. "What a wonderful turn of events, Faith. You're returning as a guest speaker, respected and admired." "It's true," she smiled. "Life really has its surprises." The lecture was scheduled for graduation week, exactly the same time when Faith had been humiliated years earlier. She carefully prepared her speech, wanting it to be meaningful for those young people just starting their careers. On the day of the lecture, Faith arrived at the college with Deborah and Clarence, who insisted on accompanying her despite his frailty. The auditorium was packed, not just with graduates, but with faculty, staff, and even former students who had heard about the event. Amanda Thompson was there, sitting in the front row. The two exchanged smiles and nods, remembering their shared journey. "Welcome," the coordinator began, "to the lecture by Professor Faith Johnson, one of our region's most distinguished educators and an alumna of this very institution." Faith stepped onto the stage with visible emotion. It was the same stage where she had once received her diploma amid mockery, but now she stood there as an honored guest speaker. "Dear graduates," she began, "8 years ago I was sitting where you are now, receiving my degree in education. I was 68 at the time." The young audience watched her with attention and respect, a far cry from the reception she had received years before. "That day," Faith continued, "some colleagues mocked me, questioned my abilities, and made cruel comments about my age. It was one of the most painful moments of my life." A respectful silence filled the auditorium. "But today," she smiled, "I'm here to tell you how that pain turned into motivation, how that humiliation became fuel to build a meaningful career, and how I discovered our worth isn't determined by others' opinions." Faith shared her entire journey, from her early days as a teacher to becoming a leading figure in education. She spoke about the challenges, the victories, the moments of doubt, and above all, the lessons she'd learned. "To all of you graduating today," she said, looking directly at the young audience, "you'll face all kinds of prejudice. For being too young, for lacking experience, for having different ideas. My advice is, don't let others' opinions define your worth or limit your dreams." The crowd listened with growing attention. "Education," Faith continued, "is one of the noblest professions. You'll shape the future, one child at a time. It doesn't matter if you're 22 or 72. What matters is your passion for teaching and your dedication to your students." Faith ended her speech with a powerful message. Every day in the classroom, remember, you can be the difference in a child's life. You can be the teacher who believes when no one else does, who sees potential where others see problems, who plants seeds of dreams that will bloom years later. The applause was even warmer than at the state conference. The young graduates stood in a show of respect and admiration that moved Faith deeply. During the Q&A session, the questions were respectful and thoughtful. The students wanted to know how she found the strength to continue after the humiliation, how she developed patience with difficult students, and how she balanced personal life and career. "Professor Faith," one young graduate asked, "when did you know you'd chosen the right profession?" "When a 6-year-old taught me that learning has no age limit," Faith replied. "That's when I realized education is a two-way street. We teach and learn at the same time." After the talk, several graduates approached to thank her personally. Some admitted they'd been unsure about pursuing teaching, but said Faith's words had inspired them to keep going. "Professor," one young man said, "I was thinking of giving up on teaching because of the prejudice I face as a man in early childhood education. But your story showed me we can overcome any prejudice with competence and dedication." "Stay strong," Faith said warmly. "Children need positive male role models. You can make a real difference." Amanda Thompson approached her at the end of the event. "Faith," she said emotionally, "what a beautiful transformation to witness, from being humiliated to becoming an inspiring speaker in the same place." "Professor Amanda," Faith smiled, "thank you for planting the seeds that brought me here. That conversation in your office years ago was crucial in keeping me from giving up." "You planted your own seeds," Amanda corrected. "I just offered a little water." Clarence was visibly moved. "Faith," he said with a trembling voice, "what an honor to witness your journey. From housekeeper to a leader in education. What an inspiring story." "Clarence," Faith hugged him affectionately, "none of this would have been possible without your constant support. You were my first teacher, my greatest encourager, and my best friend." In her 7th year as a teacher, Faith Johnson faced the challenge of organizing all the knowledge she had accumulated. The book she had been writing in her spare time was nearly finished, and several publishers had expressed interest in releasing it. "Faith," said the editor reviewing her manuscript, "your story has all the elements of a bestseller: triumph, inspiration, and practical lessons that can help many people." "I didn't write it with sales in mind," Faith replied honestly. "I wrote it to share experiences that might help other educators. And that's exactly what makes the book special," the editor smiled. "Authenticity is what's most lacking in publishing today." The book, Never Too Late to Dream, A Teacher at 76, was launched in a ceremony at New Haven Public School itself. Faith insisted on holding the event there, in the place where it had all begun. The launch party brought together the entire school community, fellow educators, local officials, and many of the people Faith had impacted over the years. Rose was there, now in her final year of education. Patricia attended with her son, now a successful student in his teens. "Teacher Faith," said the mayor of Riverside during the ceremony, "your book is a portrait of the education we want: inclusive, humane, and transformative." The book became a critical and commercial success. Faith began receiving invitations for book signings, television interviews, and lectures at universities in various cities. "Faith," Deborah said one afternoon, "do you realize you've become an education celebrity?" "Deborah," Faith laughed, "celebrity, nothing. I'm just a teacher who decided to tell her story." "A story that's inspiring thousands of people," Deborah corrected. Indeed, Faith started receiving letters and emails from readers across the country. They were people who had connected with her journey and found motivation to pursue their own dreams. One letter that moved her deeply came from a 60-year-old woman in rural Pennsylvania. "Teacher Faith, after reading your book, I went back to school. Now I'm in my first year of literature studies, and I plan to become a teacher like you. Thank you for showing me it's never too late." "Clarence," Faith said, showing him the letter, "look at the impact our story is having." "Our story?" Clarence smiled weakly. His health had deteriorated in recent months. "Of course ours," Faith confirmed. "You were my unofficial co-author. Without your advice and encouragement, none of this would have happened." "Faith," Clarence said in a tired voice, "you were the best student I ever had, and the best friend I've ever known." Clarence's declining health became a constant concern for Faith. She began visiting him daily, bringing news from the school and updates on ongoing projects. "Clarence," she said one winter afternoon, "would you like me to read you some passages from the book? You haven't had a chance to see the final version." "Of course," he smiled. "I love hearing your voice." Faith read several chapters, including those where she spoke about Clarence's importance in her journey. The old teacher listened with his eyes closed, a serene smile on his face. "Faith," he said when she finished reading, "what a beautiful legacy you're leaving. Your story will inspire generations." "Our legacy," she corrected again. Clarence passed away on a quiet September morning, peacefully in his sleep at 80. Faith was by his side, holding his hand. The wake was well attended, bringing together dozens of former students and fellow teachers Clarence had influenced over 40 years in education. Faith made sure to speak during the ceremony. "Clarence," she said, her voice trembling, "was more than a friend. He was a mentor, a guide, and the reason I found my place in the world. He believed in me when few others did, and he taught me that education is about planting seeds of hope." Clarence's passing was devastating for Faith. For weeks she felt lost, as if she had lost not just a friend but a part of herself. Deborah noticed Faith's sadness and decided to step in. "Faith," she said one afternoon, "Clarence wouldn't want to see you like this. He'd want you to continue the work you both started." "I know, Deborah," Faith sighed, "but it's hard. He was always there when I needed advice." "And he still is," Deborah said gently. "In the values he taught you, the principles you shared, the lessons you learned from him." Gradually, Faith found the strength to carry on. She decided to honor Clarence by creating a new project, a mentorship program for retired teachers who wanted to return to education. Clarence always said knowledge shouldn't sit idle, Faith explained during the program's launch. This project is a way to keep his philosophy alive. The Masters of Experience program was an immediate success. Dozens of retired teachers signed up to return to work, whether as substitute teachers, mentors for young educators, or coordinators for special projects. Among them was Anthony, a 75-year-old retired math teacher who had left the profession 5 years earlier. "Ms. Faith," he said during his interview, "I read your book and realized I still have so much to give to education." "Of course you do, Mr. Anthony," Faith smiled. "Experience is our greatest treasure." The program quickly expanded, with several public schools requesting the participation of the Masters of Experience. The results were exceptional. Younger teachers grew more confident, students became more motivated, and there was a renewed appreciation for the value of experience in education. In her 8th year as a teacher, Faith found herself in the unexpected position of receiving an invitation to speak abroad. A university in Portugal had read her book and wanted to learn more about her work firsthand. "Ms. Faith," the Portuguese dean said during a video call, "your intergenerational education model has sparked great interest here in Europe. Would it be possible to arrange a visit?" Faith was tempted, but respectfully declined. "Professor," she replied, "I'm deeply grateful for the invitation, but my place is here with my children and my community." "I understand completely," the dean said with admiration. "It's precisely that connection to your roots that makes your work so special." Her decision not to travel abroad reflected Faith's clear understanding of her priorities. She had learned that real impact happens in everyday life, through consistency and daily presence with those who need it most. That year, one of her greatest joys was seeing Rose graduate with a degree in education and secure a teaching position in the public school system. "Ms. Faith," Rose said at her graduation, "I want to work just like you, close to the community, valuing every student, making a real difference in people's lives." "Rose," Faith replied, moved, "you already make a difference. Your journey alone inspires other women." Rose was assigned to work at a school in an underserved neighborhood, where she applied many of the strategies she had learned from observing Faith. Within months, she had started her own study group for parents. This is how knowledge multiplies, Faith thought, watching Rose follow in her footsteps. Her 9th year as a teacher brought unexpected recognition. Faith was nominated for a National Education Award, competing with educators from across the country. "Faith," said the Secretary of Education, "your nomination is a pride for Riverside. Regardless of the outcome, you're already a winner." "Secretary Paul," Faith replied, "the greatest award I've ever received is the affection of my children and the respect of my colleagues." The award ceremony was to be held in Washington, D.C., but Faith chose not to attend. Instead, she asked Deborah to represent her in case she won. "Faith," Deborah said, "are you sure? This is a historic moment." "Deborah," she smiled, "historic moments happen every day in my classroom. That's where I need to be." To many people's surprise, Faith won the Educator of the Year award. Deborah called from the ceremony to deliver the news. "Faith," Deborah said emotionally over the phone, "you won. The entire audience stood up when they announced your name." "What joy," Faith replied, but without the excitement Deborah expected. "You don't seem thrilled," Deborah observed. "I'm happy, of course," Faith explained, "but for me the real prize is seeing Michael, that struggling boy I helped years ago, now in 6th grade as one of the school's top students." The national award brought even more visibility to Faith's work. Journalists from major outlets began seeking her out for interviews and special features. One story that moved her deeply aired on a television program about education, showcasing not only her work, but also testimonies from dozens of people whose lives she had touched. "Teacher Faith changed my life," said Rose in the feature. "She showed me that learning has no age limit and dreams can come true at any time. She taught my son to read with a patience I'd never seen before," shared one mother, "and she taught me that I could go back to school too." "Teacher Faith is proof that life experience is the best qualification for teaching," said a fellow teacher. Watching the feature with her children was emotional. They were proud to see their teacher on TV, but to them, she was just Aunt Faith, who told the best stories and always had a hug ready. In her 10th year as a teacher, Faith faced the dilemma of deciding when to retire. At 78, she still felt energetic and motivated, but began noticing her pace wasn't what it used to be. "Deborah," she said in a frank conversation, "I think I need to start thinking about the future." "What do you mean?" Deborah was startled. "Are you thinking of retiring?" "I'm thinking of preparing for it," Faith explained. "I want to make sure everything I've built here continues even without my daily presence." The idea of stepping back gradually led Faith to intensify her work training new leaders. She identified younger teachers with potential to carry on her projects. Lauren, the young teacher she had mentored years earlier, was a natural candidate. She had become an experienced and respected educator, applying many lessons learned from Faith. "Lauren," Faith said one afternoon, "I'd like to talk to you about taking over the mentorship program." "It would be an honor," Lauren replied immediately. "But you're not thinking of leaving, are you?" "I'm thinking of ensuring the work continues," Faith said wisely. "That's how truly important projects endure." Over the following months, Faith worked intensively on transitioning responsibilities. She documented all the methodologies she had developed, organized reference materials, and trained a new generation of educational leaders. The Masters of Experience program had expanded so much that it practically ran itself. Rose, now an experienced teacher, had taken over the coordination of several initiatives, and the parent study group continued to grow under the leadership of other volunteers. But just when everything seemed headed for a smooth transition, Faith faced an unexpected crisis. The new municipal administration, which had taken office at the beginning of the year, began questioning the costs of the special programs developed in the school system. "Faith," Deborah said during a tense meeting, "the new Secretary of Education wants to review all projects she considers non-essential. The mentorship program and the study groups are on the list for cuts." "Cuts? What do you mean, cuts?" Faith felt her heart tighten. "These programs have transformed lives, Deborah. I know that, you know that, but the new administration only sees numbers," Deborah explained, frustrated. "They want to focus solely on traditional education and eliminate what they call extracurricular activities." The new Secretary of Education, Marlene Stewart, a 45-year-old woman with a degree in public administration, had taken office with an agenda of modernization and efficiency. To her, programs like those developed by Faith were a waste of resources. "Professor Faith," Marlene said during a meeting called specifically to discuss the cuts, "I understand you've developed some interesting work, but we need to focus on the basics, literacy and math. We don't have the budget for social programs." "Secretary Marlene," Faith replied firmly, "these aren't social programs. They're educational initiatives that improve children's academic performance." "We have data that proves it," Deborah added, showing charts. "Schools participating in Professor Faith's programs have passing rates 20% higher." "Data can be interpreted in many ways," Marlene said coldly. "My decision is final. The programs will end at the end of the semester." Faith left the meeting devastated. 10 years of hard work, hundreds of lives transformed, and it would all be dismantled over spreadsheets and budgets. "Deborah," she said on the way back to school, "I can't let this happen. These people depend on these programs." "Faith," Deborah sighed, "unfortunately, we don't have the authority to decide. The secretary has full power to set priorities." "Then we'll show her she's making a mistake," Faith said with determination. "We'll organize the community to defend the programs." Faith launched a campaign to save the projects she had developed. She spoke with parents, teachers, former study group participants, and all the beneficiaries of the programs. Rose was one of the first to join the effort. "Professor Faith," she said, "I'll do everything I can to help. These programs changed my life and so many others." "Rose," Faith smiled, "your own journey is the best proof that these programs work." Lauren also joined the campaign. "Professor Faith," she said, "the young teachers in the system are outraged. Many of us were trained in the mentorship program. We'll organize." The movement grew quickly. Parents organized petitions. Teachers wrote open letters, and former study group participants prepared testimonies about how the programs had impacted their lives. Patricia, the young mother who had resumed her studies years earlier, was one of the most active in the campaign. "Professor Faith," she said, "without the study group, I would never have finished high school. My son wouldn't have the future he has today." "Patricia," Faith replied, moved, "you are living proof that education transforms lives." The campaign caught the attention of the local press. Newspapers published stories about the threatened programs, and a television station ran a special feature highlighting the results achieved. "This is teacher Faith Johnson," said the reporter during the segment, "who at 78 years old sees a decade of work threatened by budget cuts. It's not about preserving my work," Faith explained in the interview, "but about maintaining programs that have proven to improve the quality of education in our city." The media backlash unsettled Marlene, who found herself pressured to publicly justify her decision. At a press conference, she attempted to defend the cuts. "We need to be realistic," Marlene told the journalists. "Public funds must be used with maximum efficiency. Secondary programs consume resources that could improve basic education." "But, Madam Secretary," one reporter challenged, "the data shows these programs actually enhance basic education." "Data can be manipulated," Marlene replied, visibly irritated. "My responsibility is to concrete numbers, not sentimental projects." The phrase "sentimental projects" sparked outrage in the education community. Several teachers and administrators spoke out publicly against the characterization. Amanda Thompson, who now held a position at the State Department of Education, decided to step in. She called Faith to offer support. "Faith," Amanda said, "I've been following the situation in the news. What they're doing to your work is unacceptable." "Professor Amanda," Faith sighed, "I'm fighting, but sometimes it feels like a losing battle." "Don't give up," Amanda said firmly. "I'll use my connections at the state level to push for the programs to continue." Amanda mobilized other influential educators, and soon a support network formed at the state level. Education secretaries from other cities wrote letters defending the programs Faith had developed. "Professor Faith," wrote the education secretary of Valleyfield, "the programs you developed are a model for our region. It would be an irreparable loss to end them." The political pressure began to trouble the mayor of Riverside, who hadn't expected his secretary's decision to cause such controversy. He called a meeting with Marlene to reassess the situation. "Marlene," the mayor said, "this issue is escalating beyond what we anticipated. Perhaps we should reconsider." "Mayor," Marlene replied stubbornly, "we can't make decisions based on public pressure. The cuts are necessary to balance the budget." "But what if we find other ways to cut costs?" the mayor suggested. "The decision is final," Marlene insisted. "The programs will be terminated." Marlene's inflexibility even frustrated the mayor, but he chose not to confront her directly at that moment. Faith redoubled her efforts, organizing a large community meeting to discuss the cuts. The event was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the New Haven Public School Gymnasium. Over 300 people attended the meeting. Parents, teachers, former students of the programs, local officials, and representatives from other schools in the area were all present. "Everyone," Faith began her speech, "we're here to defend something very important, the right to a complete education. Not just reading and math, but an education that shapes well-rounded citizens." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Several attendees stood up to share how the programs had impacted their lives. "I was a woman with no prospects," said one participant from the study group. "Today, I'm a nursing assistant and enrolled in college, all thanks to the encouragement I received here." "My son struggled with learning," testified one mother. "The mentorship program saved her self-esteem and her academic future. As a young teacher, I found in Mrs. Faith the guidance I needed to become a better educator," said a fellow teacher. The testimonials multiplied for 2 hours. Faith was moved to see how her work had touched so many lives in different ways. At the end of the meeting, a motion calling for the programs to be maintained was unanimously approved. The motion would be delivered directly to the mayor. "Mrs. Faith," said the president of the Parents Association, "you can count on our full support. We'll fight this to the end." "Thank you," Faith replied emotionally. Together, we are stronger. The community pressure continued to grow. Online petitions gathered thousands of signatures, and social media was flooded with posts defending the programs. Marlene, however, remained unmoved. In an interview with a local newspaper, she reaffirmed her position. "I won't yield to populist pressures," she said. "My responsibility is administrative efficiency, not programs that consume resources without measurable results." The statement sparked even more outrage. Several city council members spoke out against the cuts, and some even filed bills to ensure the program's continuation. "Councilman," Faith said during a hearing at the council, "this isn't about defending my personal work, but about protecting initiatives that have proven to improve education in our city." "Mrs. Faith," replied the chair of the Education Committee, "the council members are deeply concerned about the situation. We'll explore legal ways to keep the programs running." The political mobilization was working, but Marlene still had the executive power on her side. She announced that the programs would officially end by late November, regardless of the pressure she faced. "Deborah," Faith said one October afternoon, "I think we've lost this battle. Marlene won't back down." "It's not over yet," Deborah tried to cheer her friend. "We still have a month to turn things around." "But what if we don't succeed?" Faith asked, disheartened. 10 years of work thrown away. "If we don't," Deborah said firmly, "we'll find other ways to keep going. Maybe through NGOs, community associations, or partnerships with other institutions." The idea of continuing the work outside the city's structure gave Faith new hope. She began exploring alternative possibilities to keep the programs running. Rose offered to help search for options. "Mrs. Faith," she said, "I know several organizations that support educational projects. Let's research together." "Rose," Faith smiled, "you've always been my best student. Now you're my best partner." The two began mapping out potential funding and institutional support. They discovered that several local businesses had corporate social responsibility programs focused on education. One company that showed interest was Tech Valley, a technology firm that always invested in innovative educational projects. "Mrs. Faith," said the company's social responsibility director during a meeting, "your work is exactly the kind of initiative our company wants to support." "Do you truly believe in the potential of these programs?" Faith asked. "We do, and we want to help expand them," the director confirmed. "We're willing to fully fund the activities." The possibility of corporate support energized the whole team. But Faith knew implementing the programs outside the official school system would be complicated. "Rose," she said, "how will we run the study groups without using school spaces?" "We'll use other venues," Rose replied determinedly. "Community centers, churches, neighborhood associations. The important thing is to keep people united." Lauren also got involved in the search for alternative solutions. "Ms. Faith," she said, "after talking with other teachers, many volunteered to participate even outside work hours." "That's beautiful," Faith said, moved. "You're showing me the work will continue with or without official support." While organizing alternatives, the campaign to keep the programs within the municipal structure continued. Amanda Thompson managed to arrange a meeting between Faith and the State Secretary of Education. "Ms. Faith," the secretary said, "your work is recognized across the state. Would it be possible to transfer the programs to our structure?" "How so?" Faith asked, intrigued. "We could create a state pilot project based on your methodologies," he explained. "That way the programs would continue, but with state funding, not municipal." The offer was tempting, but Faith worried state bureaucracy might strip the programs of their essence. "Mr. Secretary," she said, "my work has always been focused on the local community. I fear a larger structure might lose that personal touch." "I understand your concern," the secretary replied, "but we can structure it to preserve local autonomy. You'd oversee it directly, with full freedom to adapt to each community's needs." Faith asked for time to consider the proposal. It was a chance to save the programs, but she needed to be sure it wasn't just a way to bury the work under state red tape. In November, just weeks before the programs were set to officially end, an unexpected turn of events occurred. The mayor of Riverside faced unsustainable political pressure and decided to intervene directly. "Marlene," he said in a tense meeting. This situation is untenable. I need you to reconsider the decision on Ms. Faith's programs. Mayor, Marlene replied firmly, my position is technical. The cuts are necessary. But they're causing major political fallout, the mayor insisted. It could jeopardize our administration. I can't make decisions based on popularity, Marlene countered. Then I will, the mayor said decisively. The programs stay. Find other ways to balance the budget. Marlene was furious at the mayor's interference, but had no choice but to comply. The news of the program's continuation spread quickly. Faith got the call from Deborah in the middle of a lesson. Faith, Deborah said excitedly, we did it. The mayor decided to keep all the programs. Really? Faith could hardly believe it. No misunderstanding. It's true, Deborah confirmed, laughing. Marlene had to back down. The programs are staying. The classroom erupted in joy when Faith shared the news with the children. They didn't grasp the political details, but they knew their teacher was happy. Aunt Faith, one girl asked, does this mean you'll stay here with us? Yes, sweetheart, Faith smiled. I'll stay as long as you want me and I have the strength. The victory reinvigorated Faith. She felt renewed and decided to put retirement plans on hold. Deborah, she said in a conversation, I don't think it's time to stop yet. I still have so much to give. That's wonderful to hear, Deborah smiled. The school wouldn't be the same without you. But I want to start preparing my successor more systematically, Faith continued. So when the time really comes, the transition will be smooth. That's very wise, Deborah agreed. Let's put together a gradual continuity plan. Faith spent the following months organizing a formal mentorship and succession system. She meticulously documented all methodologies, created best practice manuals, and established a network of multipliers. Rose officially took over coordinating the Parent Study Group program. Lauren became responsible for the mentorship program for young teachers. Other team members took on different aspects of the work being developed. Ms. Faith, Rose said during a planning meeting, with this structure, the programs can run indefinitely, even without your daily presence. That's exactly what I want, Faith confirmed, for the work to be bigger than any one person. During her 11th year as a teacher, Faith faced a new personal challenge. Her own health began showing signs of fragility, nothing serious but enough to remind her that she too had limitations. Faith, the doctor said during a routine checkup, you're in excellent health for your age, but you need to slow down. You can't keep working like you're 50. Doctor, Faith smiled, I'm 79 and feel like I'm 40. I know you feel that way, the doctor laughed, but your body is 79. You need to respect it. The doctor's recommendations made Faith seriously reflect on her limits. She decided to gradually reduce her workload, keeping only essential activities. Deborah, she said, I'm cutting back on external consulting and focusing on direct work with the children and coordinating local programs. Faith, Deborah replied, concerned, are you okay? Are you feeling unwell? I'm great, Faith reassured her, just being realistic about my energy. I want to work well for as long as possible, not burn out quickly. The decision to slow down was difficult but necessary. Faith declined several invitations for lectures and consulting, prioritizing the local work she considered most important. One of the most significant changes was her decision to work only part-time at the school, dedicating mornings to direct teaching and afternoons to special programs. Faith, one of her children asked on the first day of the new schedule, why do you only come in the mornings now? Because in the morning you're more eager to learn, Faith explained warmly. And so am I. Paradoxically, reducing her workload made Faith even more efficient. With more time to prepare lessons and rest between activities, she could give her best during the time she spent with the children. Rose took on many of the responsibilities Faith had stepped back from. Miss Faith, she said, I'm learning so much from this new responsibility. Thank you for trusting me. Rose, Faith replied, you've been ready for a long time. I just took a while to see it. That same year, Faith faced a delicate situation involving Marlene, the secretary who had tried to cut her programs. The two met by chance at a city education event. Ms. Faith, Marlene said hesitantly, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," Faith replied politely. "I want to apologize for what happened last year," Marlene said sincerely. "I was only focused on the numbers and couldn't see the real value of your programs." "Marlene," Faith smiled, "there's no need to apologize. Everyone does what they believe is best at the time." "But I was wrong," Marlene insisted. "After seeing the continued results, I realized I was being short-sighted. Your programs truly make a difference." "What matters is that you understand now," Faith said generously, "and that we can work together to further improve education in the city." "I'd love that," Marlene said, relieved. "Can I count on your partnership from now on?" "Always," Faith confirmed. "Education is about unity, not conflict." The reconciliation with Marlene marked an important moment in Faith's journey. She had learned that even adversaries could become allies when there was respectful dialogue and shared goals. In her 12th year as a teacher, Faith received an offer that genuinely tempted her. A private university in Riverside offered her a position as a full professor, specifically to teach intergenerational education. "Professor Faith," the dean said during the proposal, "we want to create the first specialization course in intergenerational education in the country. You would be the ideal academic coordinator." "It's an honorable offer," Faith replied, "but my place is in basic education, not at the university." "Think about it," the dean insisted. "At the university, you would train hundreds of teachers who would carry your methodologies across the country." The offer was truly tempting. Faith could multiply her impact by shaping new educators. But something inside her resisted the idea of leaving direct work with children. "I need time to think," she finally said. "Of course," the dean agreed, "but I hope you'll consider it seriously. It would be a loss for the country if your knowledge remained limited to just one city." Faith talked at length with Deborah and Rose about the offer. Both thought she should accept. "Professor Faith," Rose said, "at the university, you could train teachers who would work exactly like you. It would multiply your impact 1,000-fold. "But Rose," Faith hesitated, "I'm 80 years old. Do I have the energy to start something new?" "You have energy for anything," Deborah said with conviction, "and enough experience to revolutionize teacher training in this country." Despite the convincing arguments, Faith decided to decline the offer. Her decision was based on a clear understanding of her own priorities. "Dean," she said in a call, "I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but my heart is here, with my community and my children." "I understand," the dean said, though clearly disappointed. "But the offer remains open. If you change your mind, we'll be here." The decision to stay in local work reinforced Faith's certainty that she had found her true purpose. She didn't want to be an academic talking about education. She wanted to keep being an educator practicing it. That year, Faith also faced the challenge of working with a new generation of children. Her classes now included the children of former students from her earliest groups. "Aunt Faith," a little girl said during class, "my mom said you taught her when she was little like me." "It's true," Faith smiled, "and I bet she was a very smart girl just like you." "She said you told the best stories in the world," the girl continued. "Can you tell us one?" "Of course, sweetheart," Faith replied. "I'll tell you the story of a woman who dreamed of being a teacher." Seeing the children of former students in her classroom brought a whole new dimension to Faith's work. She was literally bridging generations, watching the fruits of her labor continue through families. "Deborah," she said one afternoon, "I never imagined I'd live to teach the second generation. It's an indescribable feeling." "Faith," Deborah smiled, "you've created a legacy that goes beyond any program or methodology. You've built a tradition of valuing education in this community." Her 13th year as a teacher brought unexpected recognition. Faith was invited to give a lecture at the American Academy of Education, an honor reserved for the country's most outstanding educators. "Professor Faith," said the Academy's president, "your contribution to American education deserves recognition at the highest level." "Mr. President," Faith replied humbly, "I'm just a teacher doing my job." "An exceptional teacher," he corrected, "one who has proven that age and life experience are valuable assets in education." The lecture at the academy was a milestone in Faith's career. She spoke to an audience of educators, researchers, and officials about the importance of valuing teachers of all ages. American education, she said during her talk, must stop dismissing experience in the name of youth. We need both young and seasoned educators working together, each contributing their unique strengths. The audience, composed of some of the nation's most respected educators, received her words with admiration and respect. "Professor Faith," asked one Academy member during the Q&A session, "what's the secret to your professional longevity?" "Genuine love for what I do," she answered simply. "When you love teaching, every day is a new discovery." The national recognition brought even more visibility to Faith's work, but she remained focused on her local community. To her, the most important recognition was still the affection of her students and the respect of her community. In her 14th year as a teacher, Faith faced a situation that tested all her principles and skills. A particularly challenging child was enrolled in her class. Lucas, a 6-year-old boy, had been expelled from 2 previous schools for aggressive behavior. His desperate parents turned to New Haven Public School as a last resort. "Professor Faith," Lucas's mother said during registration, "I know my son is difficult, but he's not a bad kid. He just can't adapt." "Every child has potential," Faith replied with conviction. "We'll figure out together the best way to help Lucas." In the first few days, Lucas proved to be quite challenging. He disrupted lessons, fought with classmates, and had seemingly unprovoked outbursts. "Faith," Deborah said worriedly, "maybe we need specialized help for Lucas." "Not yet," Faith responded. "First, I want to understand what's behind this behavior." Faith began observing Lucas carefully, looking for patterns in his behavior. She noticed his outbursts mostly happened when he felt ignored or misunderstood. "Lucas," she said during a calm moment, "can we talk?" "I don't want to talk," the boy replied defensively. "That's okay," Faith said gently. "Then I'll talk and you just listen, all right?" "Fine," Lucas agreed hesitantly. "You know something, Lucas," Faith began. "When I was new at school, many years ago, I also felt different from others. People didn't understand me and it made me really angry." Lucas looked at her with interest for the first time. "It's true," Faith continued. "And you know what I learned? That when we act out in anger, people get scared of us. And when they're scared, they pull away, then we feel even more alone." "What did you do?" Lucas asked quietly. "I learned to show people what I was feeling with words, not anger," Faith explained. "And you know what happened? They started to understand me better." The conversation marked the beginning of a gradual transformation in Lucas. Faith invested extra time working with him one-on-one, teaching him to express his emotions constructively. "Lucas," she said during one of their individual sessions, "when you feel like hitting someone, what can you do instead?" "Tell you," Lucas suggested. "That's right," Faith smiled. "Or tell your mom, or any adult you trust." "What if they don't believe me?" Lucas asked. "Then you try explaining again calmly," Faith said. "Sometimes people need to hear things more than once to understand." The work with Lucas lasted for months, but gradually he began to integrate better with the class. His outbursts became less frequent and intense, and for the first time, he started making friends. "Ms. Johnson," Lucas's mother said during a meeting, "I don't know how to thank you. My son is unrecognizable. For the first time, he actually enjoys going to school." "Lucas just needed to feel understood," Faith explained. "Every child wants to be accepted and loved." The success with Lucas reinforced for Faith the importance of never giving up on a child, no matter how challenging they may seem. This experience became one of the most rewarding of her career. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. In her 15th year as a teacher, Faith faced increasing pressure to seriously consider retirement. Now 81 years old, she still had energy and enthusiasm, but some people began questioning whether it was time for her to step down. "Faith," said a member of the Regional Education Board, "you've already built an impressive legacy. Don't you think it's time to rest and enjoy retirement? I still feel useful and energetic, Faith replied. As long as my children need me and I'm able, I'll keep going. But don't you have other plans? Travel, relax, spend time with family, the official pressed. My family is these children and this community, Faith said firmly. This is where I find my fulfillment. The pressure to retire didn't just come from authorities, but also from some colleagues who felt she was overdoing it by working at such an advanced age. Faith, one teacher said during a meeting, don't you think you're setting a bad example for us younger teachers, as if retiring and being happy isn't an option? Everyone has their own path, Faith replied diplomatically. I respect those who choose to retire early, and I hope they respect my choice to continue. But you're taking up positions that could go to younger teachers, the colleague insisted. I'm not taking anything away from anyone, Faith said firmly. I'm holding this position because I'm qualified, just like any teacher at any age. The discussion revealed tensions Faith hadn't expected. Some colleagues saw her staying on as an implicit criticism of their own retirement choices. Deborah noticed the situation and decided to step in. Everyone, she said during a faculty meeting, Ms. Johnson isn't obligated to retire just because she's reached a certain age. As long as she's capable and willing to work, she deserves respect. But Deborah, another teacher argued, it's not about age, it's about giving opportunities to the younger generation. Opportunities exist, Deborah countered. The district is constantly hiring new teachers. Faith staying doesn't prevent that. The tension from the discussion saddened Faith. She had never imagined her dedication could be seen as something negative. Rose, she said in a private conversation, maybe it really is time for me to retire. I don't want to be a source of division among my colleagues. Teacher Faith, Rose said emphatically, don't let some people's jealousy interfere with your calling. You have every right to work as long as you want and can. But Rose, maybe they have a point, Faith hesitated. Maybe I'm being selfish by not making room for younger teachers. Selfish? Rose nearly shouted. Teacher, you've trained dozens of educators, created programs that benefit hundreds of families, and dedicated your life to this community. How is that selfish? The conversation with Rose helped Faith regain perspective. She decided she wouldn't retire because of outside pressure, only when she truly felt it was time. That year, Faith also faced a significant personal challenge. She began noticing small memory lapses, nothing serious, but enough to worry her. Doctor, she said during a checkup, sometimes I forget names of people I've known for years, or I get confused about what day it is. Faith, the doctor said calmly, some memory lapses are normal at your age. But let's run some tests to be sure everything's all right. The tests revealed Faith had early signs of mild cognitive decline, nothing alarming yet, but something to monitor. What does this mean for my work? She asked the doctor. For now, nothing, he replied. You're functioning perfectly. You just need regular checkups and maybe some adjustments to your routine. The news about mild cognitive decline frightened Faith more than she admitted. The thought of losing her mental abilities was her greatest fear. Deborah, she confided one day, I need to tell you something. The doctor said I have early signs of memory loss. What do you mean? Deborah sounded alarmed. You seem fine. I haven't noticed anything different. For now, everything's normal, Faith reassured her, but I might need to start preparing for the possibility of stepping back. Faith, Deborah said warmly, we'll face this together, and we'll make the most of the time you still have ahead. The discussion about her health led Faith to speed up succession plans. She intensified training for Rose and other team members, wanting to ensure her programs could continue without her. Rose, she said one afternoon, I want you to officially take over as general coordinator for all the programs we've built. Teacher Faith, Rose hesitated, I don't feel ready yet. You've been ready for years, Faith assured her. I'm the one who struggles to delegate because I love this work too much. What if I make mistakes? Rose asked uncertainly. You will, Faith smiled, and you'll learn from them, just like I did. That's how you grow as an educator. Over the following months, Faith gradually passed more responsibilities to Rose and others. It was hard for her, but necessary. Her 16th year as a teacher brought major changes to Faith's routine. Following medical advice, she reduced her workload further, keeping only essential tasks. "Deborah," she said, "I'll only work 3 days a week. On the other days, I'll be available for consultations and emergencies, but no regular duties." "That's a wise decision," Deborah agreed. "This way you can keep doing the work you love without overextending yourself." The lighter schedule was well received by the children and families, who understood it was Faith's way of protecting her health to stay in their lives. "Aunt Faith," a child asked, "you won't come every day anymore?" "I'll come 3 days," Faith explained. "But on the other days, if you want to talk to me, just ask Aunt Deborah to call me." "Okay," the child agreed. "What matters is that you're not leaving." The reduced workload allowed Faith to have more time for reflection and planning. She used this time to write a second book, this one specifically focused on methodologies for intergenerational education. "Rose," she said while organizing the chapters, "I want to document everything. Every technique, every strategy, every lesson learned." "Professor Faith," Rose smiled, "you're creating a handbook for future generations of educators." "That's exactly it," Faith confirmed. "I want my experience to help educators even after I'm gone." Faith's second book was received with even more enthusiasm than the first. Publishers from other countries expressed interest in translating it, and universities began including it in their education course bibliographies. "Professor Faith," the editor said, "this book could become a classic in American education." "If it helps other educators," Faith replied, "it has already served its purpose." In her 17th year as a teacher, Faith faced a crisis that tested all her experience and wisdom. A complex family situation involving one of her students required delicate intervention. Emma, a 7-year-old girl who had been in her class for 2 years, began showing concerning behavioral changes. She became withdrawn, her drawings turned dark, and she started missing school frequently. "Emma," Faith said in a private conversation, "do you want to tell me what's happening?" "I can't talk," the girl whispered. "They said if I tell, it'll be worse." Emma's response set off every alarm in Faith's experienced mind. She had dealt with similar cases throughout her career and knew how to recognize signs of abuse. "Emma," she said gently, "you know you can trust me, right?" "I know," the girl replied with tears in her eyes, "but I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" Faith asked carefully. "That they'll hurt my mom," Emma said quietly. The revelation confirmed Faith's suspicions. She knew she had to act with extreme care to protect the child without putting her at greater risk. "Deborah," she said, after the conversation with Emma, "we need to involve Child Protective Services. We have a delicate situation here." "Are you sure?" Deborah asked worriedly. "These interventions can be traumatic." "More traumatic than letting the situation continue," Faith replied firmly. "Emma is being threatened into silence." The intervention process was complex and lengthy. Faith stayed by Emma's side throughout, offering emotional support and ensuring the girl felt protected. "Aunt Faith," Emma said after the situation was resolved and she was placed in her grandmother's care, "thank you for helping me." "Emma," Faith replied emotionally, "this is what teachers are for, to take care of you." Emma's case reinforced for Faith the importance of her experience in education. Her ability to recognize subtle signs and act appropriately had saved a child. "Faith," the social worker assigned to the case said, "your intervention was crucial. Without your experience, we might not have identified the situation in time." "That's what years of teaching are for," Faith answered, "to recognize when children need help beyond just lessons." That same year, Faith received a special honor that moved her deeply. The City Council decided to create the Faith Johnson Education Award to be given annually to educators who excelled in working with underprivileged communities. "Professor Faith Johnson," said the City Council president during the award ceremony, "your life and work deserve to be honored through an award that encourages other educators to follow your example." "Mr. President," Faith replied emotionally, "it's an honor to have my name associated with an educational award. I hope it inspires other teachers to never give up on their students." The creation of the award marked a moment of recognition that went beyond Faith's individual career. Her name would now be a permanent reference in the city's education system. In her 18th year as a teacher, Faith faced a difficult decision about her future. Her memory lapses had become more frequent, though they didn't yet significantly interfere with her work. "Doctor," she said during an appointment, "it's getting harder to remember names and dates. Sometimes I forget where I put my teaching materials." "Faith," the doctor said kindly, "that's expected given your condition, but you're still functioning very well cognitively." "How much longer can I keep working?" she asked directly. "That depends on you," the doctor replied. "As long as you feel confident and capable, and as long as there's no risk to the children, you can continue." The conversation with the doctor led Faith to reflect deeply on her future. She knew she would have to make a decision soon. "Rose," she said one afternoon, "I need to start seriously thinking about retirement." "Why?" Rose asked, alarmed. "You're doing fine. The children adore you." "I'm fine now," Faith explained. "But my memory is slipping. I don't want to wait until it affects my work with the children." "But Professor Faith," Rose insisted, "you still have so much to offer." "And I will keep offering," Faith smiled, "but maybe in a different way. As a mentor, an advisor, a guiding presence, not necessarily as an active teacher." Faith's decision to seriously consider retirement caused a stir in the school and the community. When the news spread, dozens of people reached out, asking her to reconsider. "Professor Faith," said one mother of a former student, "you can't retire now. My youngest hasn't had you as a teacher yet." "Sweetheart," Faith replied warmly, "there will be other wonderful teachers for your daughter, and I won't disappear. I'll just change how I contribute." "But it won't be the same," the mother said sadly. "Nothing stays the same forever," Faith said wisely. "What matters is that what we've built together will live on through others." During the last months of that school year, Faith worked harder to ensure a smooth transition. She collaborated closely with Rose and others, passing on knowledge and responsibilities. "Rose," she said during a planning session, "when I retire, you'll be my natural successor. I have complete faith in you." "Professor Faith," Rose said tearfully, "I'll never fill the void you'll leave." "You don't have to fill my void," Faith smiled. "You need to create your own space, your own contribution. You're already an exceptional educator in your own right." Faith's official retirement announcement was made at a special community meeting. The decision was final. She would retire at the end of that school year after 18 years as a teacher. "Friends," she said to the gathered community, "the time has come for me to say goodbye to the classroom. These have been 18 wonderful years, but I feel it's time to make room for the next generation." The community's reaction was a mix of sadness and gratitude. Many cried, others stood to applaud, and some made sure to share how faith had impacted their lives. "Mrs. Faith Johnson," said one student's father, "you taught my son to read, but you taught our whole family to dream." "You showed our community that education changes lives," added a mother. "Thank you for never giving up on any child," said another. The testimonials continued for over 2 hours. Faith listened to each one with emotion, realizing for the first time the true impact she had made. Faith's retirement ceremony was scheduled for the last school day in December. It would be a farewell celebration bringing together the entire school and educational community of the town. In her final days of teaching, Faith said goodbye individually to each child, each colleague, and every staff member. They were emotional moments that would stay with her forever. "Aunt Faith," asked one of her youngest students, "are you going to miss us?" "I'll miss you very much," Faith answered sincerely. "But I'll keep you in my heart forever." "And what if we want to visit you?" the little girl continued. "You can visit me any time you want," Faith smiled. "I'll always be here for you." The retirement ceremony took place in the school gym, specially decorated for the occasion. Over 500 people attended, including officials, educators, former students, parents, and the entire local community. Deborah gave the opening speech, summarizing Faith's journey over the past 18 years. "Faith Johnson," she said, "arrived here as a 72-year-old rookie teacher. She leaves as one of the most respected educators in our region. Rose spoke on behalf of all the teachers Faith had mentored. Mrs. Faith, she said emotionally, taught us that education is about love, patience, and never giving up. We'll carry your lessons with us forever. Amanda Thompson, who had been instrumental in Faith's early journey, was also present. Faith, she said, when we first met, you were a courageous woman facing prejudice. Today, you're an inspiration to educators across the country. Several former students, now teenagers, made sure to speak at the ceremony. Michael, the struggling boy Faith had helped years earlier, now a 15-year-old honor student, moved the audience deeply. Mrs. Faith, he said, voice trembling, you saved me. When everyone thought I was a troubled kid, you saw potential in me. Today I'm a good student because you believed in me. Lucas, the once aggressive boy she had transformed through patience and understanding, was also there, now a calm and sociable teen. Aunt Faith, he said, you taught me I could express my feelings with words, not anger. Now I have so many friends because of what I learned from you. Patricia, the young mother who had returned to school through Faith's support group, brought her son, now a high school graduate about to enter college. Mrs. Faith, Patricia said, you changed two lives at once, mine and my son's. Today, he's going to college because I went back to school thanks to you. The testimonials went on for over an hour. Each speaker represented a life touched by Faith's work. When it was her turn to speak, Faith stepped onto the stage, struggling to hold back tears. She looked out at the crowd, filled with familiar, beloved faces. My friends, she began, voice shaking, 18 years ago, I walked into a classroom as a teacher for the first time. I was 72, and many people thought I was crazy. Affectionate laughter filled the room. Today, she continued, at 90 years old, I can say these were the best years of my life. Not because I became a famous or recognized teacher, but because I finally found my place in the world. The audience listened in reverent silence. I want to thank every child who taught me while I taught them, every parent who trusted me, every colleague who welcomed me, everyone who believed a 70-year-old housekeeper could become an educator. Faith paused, looking specifically at Rose, Deborah, Amanda, and others who had been pivotal in her journey. But most of all, she said, her voice even more emotional, I want to tell everyone who thinks it's too late for their dreams, it's never too late. I started at 70 and achieved everything I ever wanted. You can too. The ovation was thunderous and lasted over 5 minutes. People cried, applauded, and shouted words of affection and admiration. And now, Faith said as the applause died down, I want to leave one last message for the young people here. Respect your elders. We have much to teach. And for the elders, don't be afraid to try new things. Life is too long to waste on regrets. After the official ceremony, there was a gathering where Faith spoke individually with hundreds of people. It was a moment of celebration, gratitude, and also farewell. Teacher Faith, said Marlene, the former secretary who had tried to cut her programs, I want to apologize again and thank you for showing me that education is about people, not numbers. Marlene, Faith smiled. We all make mistakes and learn. What matters is growing from them. Tyler Wilson, the young man who had led the mockery at Faith's graduation years earlier, was also present with his family. Teacher Faith, he said emotionally, I want you to know I've learned so much from your example of dignity. Today I teach my students about respect and tolerance, partly because of the lesson you gave me that day. Tyler, Faith replied generously, that painful day ended up being a blessing. It taught me my worth doesn't depend on others' opinions. You're an inspiration, he said sincerely, to me and my children. The party lasted late into the night. When it finally ended, Faith felt exhausted but deeply fulfilled. She had officially closed her career as an active teacher. In the days following her retirement, Faith faced an unexpected emptiness. For the first time in 18 years, she had no classroom to go to. Rose, she said during a visit to the school, I miss the noise of the children, the smell of school supplies, even the faculty meetings. It's normal, Rose replied understandingly. You dedicated so much time to the school that it became part of you. Did I make a mistake retiring? Faith asked uncertainly. Teacher Faith, Rose said firmly, you made the right decision at the right time. And you still have much to contribute in other ways. Indeed, retirement didn't mean inactivity for Faith. She remained involved with the programs she had created, now as an advisor and mentor. Twice a week, she visited the school to support newer teachers. Once a month, she coordinated study group meetings for parents. And whenever complex situations arose, Deborah sought her advice. Faith, Deborah said during one of these consultations, we have a child with behavior similar to what Lucas showed years ago. Could you guide us? Of course, Faith replied immediately. Let's see what we can do. Her experience remained a valuable resource for the school, now in a more occasional but equally important role. 3 months after retirement, Faith received a surprising proposal. The Department of Education wanted to hire her as a consultant for a national project to value experienced teachers. Professor Faith, said the representative from the department, your example has inspired a national policy. We want to create programs to better utilize the experience of retired educators. How would that work? Faith asked, intrigued. You would lead a pilot project to reintegrate retired teachers into schools, not as regular teachers, but as mentors and advisors, he explained. The offer was tempting, but Faith respectfully declined. I'm honored, she said, but my commitment is to my local community. This is where I can make a real difference. I understand, the representative replied, but the offer remains open. If you change your mind, please reach out. Her decision to stay focused on local work reflected the philosophy Faith had developed over the years. Real impact happens in everyday life, in closeness, in consistency. During her first year of retirement, Faith wrote her third book, this time a full autobiography detailing her journey from childhood to retirement. Rose, she said while writing, I want to document my whole story, so others can see it's possible to overcome any obstacle. It'll be a beautiful book, Rose remarked after reading some chapters, a true story of triumph. The book, From Housekeeper to Teacher, A Life of Triumph, became a national bestseller. Faith was invited to dozens of interviews and book signings, but she only accepted those she could attend without leaving Riverside. Professor Faith, a journalist asked during an interview, what's the biggest lesson your life teaches? That it's never too late to start over, she answered without hesitation, and that our age is our experience, not our limitation. Do you have any regrets? The journalist continued. Just one, Faith smiled. Taking 70 years to realize I wanted to be a teacher. In her second year of retirement, Faith faced a new personal challenge. Her memory lapses became more frequent and noticeable. Deborah, she said during a visit to the school, sometimes I forget the names of people I've known for years. Yesterday I couldn't remember Rose's name for a few minutes. Faith, Deborah said with concern, are you seeing a doctor? Yes, she confirmed. The doctor said it's the natural aging process, but it might accelerate. Does that mean you need to stop your activities? Deborah asked. Not yet, Faith replied, but I may need to reduce my involvement even more. The progression of her memory issues brought a new reality for Faith. She had to accept help for tasks she once did alone. Rose offered to visit her daily. Professor Faith, she said, you've taken care of so many people in your life. Now it's our turn to take care of you. Rose, Faith said, moved, I never imagined I'd have a daughter of the heart like you. And I never imagined I'd have a second mother like you, Rose replied, hugging the teacher warmly. The community's care for Faith was touching. Former students took turns visiting, families sent home-cooked meals, and fellow teachers made sure to keep her updated on school news. Aunt Faith, Michael said during a visit, I want you to know I'm studying to be a teacher because of you. I want to teach kids the way you taught me. Michael, Faith smiled, struggling to remember who he was but recognizing the warmth in his voice. What a joy to know you'll be a teacher. Even with her memory struggles, Faith's loving and welcoming personality remained unchanged. She continued treating everyone with kindness and wisdom. In her third year of retirement, Faith's condition deteriorated significantly. She needed constant care and could no longer participate in activities at the school. "Rose," Deborah said in a conversation, "I think the time has come to organize a special tribute for Faith while she can still appreciate it." "You're right," Rose agreed. "She deserves to know while she's still aware how loved and respected she is." The tribute was organized for a Saturday in October. It would be a celebration of Faith's life and work, bringing together all the people she had impacted. The event was held in the same gymnasium where her retirement ceremony had taken place. Faith was brought in a wheelchair, accompanied by Rose and a nurse. "Teacher Faith," Deborah began the event. "Today we are here to celebrate a life dedicated to education and love for others." For 2 hours, people took turns sharing how Faith had touched their lives. There were stories of perseverance, gratitude, and love. "Teacher Faith taught me that dreams have no age limit," said an elderly woman who had returned to school at 60. "She saved my self-esteem when I was a child," shared a young teacher. "She showed me that education is about welcoming, not just teaching," added a fellow educator. Faith listened to the testimonials with a serene smile, even though she couldn't recall many details of the people or situations mentioned. "Dear teacher," Rose said at the end, "even if your memory fades, your legacy lives on in every life you've touched." Faith tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come clearly. Instead, she smiled and waved to the crowd, conveying all her love and gratitude through her gaze. In the following months, Faith's condition continued to decline. She needed specialized care and was transferred to a dedicated nursing home. Rose visited daily, always bringing news from the school and the programs that were still running. "Teacher Faith," she would say during her visits, "the parent study group is still strong. We have 40 people participating now." Even though she couldn't respond verbally, Faith showed joy whenever she heard about the continuation of the projects she had created. The end came peacefully on a spring morning. Faith passed away in her sleep at 93, having lived 21 years beyond the age she had begun her teaching career. The wake was one of the largest Riverside had ever seen. Thousands came to pay their last respects to the woman who had dedicated her later decades to transforming lives through education. "She proved it's never too late to follow our dreams," said the mayor during the ceremony. "And that age is wisdom, not limitation." Faith Johnson will be remembered as a symbol of perseverance and dedication, added the Department of Education Secretary. But it was the simple, heartfelt testimonials from former students, parents, and colleagues that truly honored her memory. "Aunt Faith taught me to read," said a child, "and to dream. She changed my life," declared a mother, "and my entire family's. She was the best teacher I ever knew," affirmed a fellow educator. The funeral procession traveled through the city streets, passing by New Haven Public School, where Faith had worked for 18 years. Hundreds followed the route, many holding flowers and signs with messages of gratitude. At the school, students and teachers gathered in the courtyard for one last tribute. The children sang songs Faith had taught them, and flowers were thrown over the hearse. "Goodbye, Aunt Faith," the children called out. "Thank you for everything." The funeral took place at the municipal cemetery in a ceremony that brought together representatives from all levels of Riverside society, but the true tribute lay in the tears and grateful smiles of the hundreds of ordinary people whose lives she had transformed. Rose gave the final speech. "Professor Faith," she said, her voice trembling, "you taught us that education is love in action, that patience is a teacher's greatest virtue, and that we must never, ever give up on a child. Your life was a lesson in courage, perseverance, and hope," Rose continued. "You proved that one person, driven by love and determination, can transform an entire community. Thank you for believing in us when no one else did. Thank you for showing us that dreams have no age limit. And thank you for teaching us that true success is measured by the number of lives we positively touch. Rest in peace, our dear teacher. Your legacy will live on through every child you taught, every adult you inspired, and every dream you helped fulfill." After the funeral, life went on, but with the certainty that Faith had left an indelible mark on the community. The programs she created continued running, coordinated by Rose and other collaborators she had trained. New Haven Public School was officially renamed Faith Johnson Public School. A statue in her honor was erected in the courtyard, depicting her surrounded by children. The Faith Johnson Education Award became one of the region's most prestigious honors, awarded annually to educators who demonstrated the same spirit of dedication and innovation. Her books continued to be read and studied in education courses across the country. Her methodologies were adopted by dozens of schools, multiplying her impact far beyond Riverside. But perhaps Faith's greatest legacy was the shift in mindset she inspired. In Riverside, and gradually in other cities, age came to be seen as an asset in education, not an obstacle. Programs to leverage the experience of seasoned teachers multiplied. Universities began accepting older students without prejudice, and stories of people changing careers after 60 became increasingly common. Professor Faith changed how we view aging, Amanda Thompson said in an interview years later. She proved that life can begin at 70, at 80, at any age. Rose, now a respected educator and community leader, always ended her speeches with the same phrase she had learned from Faith. It's never too late to dream, never too late to start over, never too late to make a difference in the world. And so, the story of the woman who had once been humiliated at a graduation for being too old to study became a symbol that age is just a number, that experience is a treasure, and that dreams have no expiration date. Faith Johnson had proven with her own life that sometimes the best is yet to come precisely when everyone thinks it's too late. She turned pain into motivation, prejudice into determination, and doubt into the certainty that, with love and persistence, anyone can leave the world better than they found it. And every time an older person decides to return to school, every time someone changes careers after 50, every time a child is welcomed with patience by an experienced teacher, the spirit of Faith Johnson lives on, proving that her greatest lesson remains true. It is never, ever too late to become who we were born to be. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're reading from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you think Faith Johnson made the right decision by persevering despite the humiliations? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for being here with us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories.